I'm a guy living in Phoenix, Arizona. This incident took place on an overnight trip into the Superstition Mountains, which are about an hour drive east of Phoenix. I'm not going to specify the exact trail because I've been doing this long enough to realize what happens when you post about stuff on the internet. Whether it's a good trail, abandoned mine, ghost, or whatever it may be, people come flocking, and with a lot of trash and loud music. Anyway, this particular trail, I was taking an 8-mile loop through a canyon. Pretty simple, in and out overnight trip. I had planned to go with my friend, but a last-minute cancel on his part left me on my own. So, with a packed bag and a car ready to go, I decided to go on my own. Not leaving the house on time and some trouble navigating rough forest roads, I didn't arrive to the trailhead until around 5:45, which for those of you who don't backpack, this is a very big no-no. I had about a 4-mile hike until I arrived at my planned camping spot, and it was getting dark fast. I figured if I moved quick enough, I could get at least 2 to 3 miles in before I had to find a spot. This strategy left me hiking a very dark trail on my own, with about 15 miles of dirt road between me and anything else. Hiking in the dark by itself is scary, especially for where I was and being on my own. Eventually, it got so dark that I could only see where my headlamp was pointing, and that's when I figured I needed to stop and get a camp set up. With only using the headlamp as my light source and trying to move fast, I ended up in a less than ideal spot, but there were some burnt pieces of wood and the remains of a fire circle, so it looked like people had been there before, but definitely not recently. My first priority was to get a fire going. I scanned the area around me and was able to find some dry wood, and I got the fire going. I got my tarp set up and cracked open a can of chili mac I had brought for myself, and was very much looking forward to eating it. I was feeling good. My camp was set up and my food was on the fire. The feeling of uneasiness from the hike in had almost gone away, but it was still there. To fully understand what happened, I have to explain to you how my camp was set up. The site I had picked was a small clearing surrounded by large pine trees, with the trail about 30 feet to my left. When you're in the woods and you have a fire going, the fire casts a circle of light around it, and everything on the edge of that circle and past it are pitch black. I was sitting on the ground near my fire, eating my dinner, when a small rock about the size of a marble was thrown into my camp. I looked at the tiny rock in shock, and I was positive that I was the only person on this trail that night. I immediately turned my light on and towards the area where I had seen the rock come from, but due to the density of the pines and brush, I could only see about 10 feet. I spent the next 15 minutes in disbelief as I scanned the tree line that surrounded me, searching for what or whoever had thrown that rock, not daring to stray too far from my fire. That, in hindsight, offered me a false sense of security. And after sitting back down and spending the rest of my time on high alert, I was able to convince myself that I had somehow kicked the rock or it had fallen from a tree. I went to sleep that night, not expecting the pure terror that was about to unfold. I woke to the sound of rustling leaves, barely inaudible if you weren't listening for them, but they were there. Still in a sleepy daze, I listened as the rustling of the leaves got harder to hear, as I assumed they were moving away from me. I went to grab my handheld flashlight that I had left next to me when I had fallen asleep, but the more I looked, the more scared I got as I came to realize that it was no longer there. I stood up in my sleeping bag and ducked out of my tarp and looked around. I was able to see a light off in the woods. It couldn't have been there more than 15 feet away. It was my flashlight, laying on the ground in a pile of leaves. This is one of the few moments in my life where I've almost shit my pants. The flashlight that I had left sitting right next to me when I had fallen asleep a few hours ago was now 15 feet away from me, past the tree line in the woods. I hurriedly slipped my boots on, clutching my knife in the other hand and keeping my head on a swivel. I weighed my options: stay here and wait out the night, or attempt the 3-mile hike back to the car in the dark. I figured that whatever or whoever was out here with me was definitely going to have a better advantage if I was on the trail without a light. so I decided to stay at the camp and wait out the night there. Eventually it came back. I could hear it walking through the woods. It was far off, but I could hear it. It sounded like someone leisurely walking by, like they were on a stroll without a care in the world. Sometimes it would walk too far away and I would lose the sound of its steps, but then an hour later, maybe two, it would return, still faint as ever. This went on for 3 or 4 hours. I listened to the steps get closer and closer until they were about 7 feet away from me. At this point the fire had gotten very small as I'd run out of wood in my pile. The footsteps stopped and everything went totally silent. I sat there still for 2 hours, clutching a knife in my hand and prayed that I wouldn't hear anything else. I stayed like that until the sun cast enough light that I could see that I was alone in my campsite. I packed my things and sped walked the 3 miles back down the trail I had taken. I arrived at the empty dirt road where my car was parked and nearly sprinted it. I jumped in and drove, and I didn't stop until I had put at least 20 miles between me and that place. I stopped at a gas station in Apache Junction to buy a Red Bull, but mostly just to see or talk to another person. As I exited the store, I was able to read what was written in the dust on the back window of my car. It said, "Sleep well." A lot of weird things have happened to me on my various adventures through Arizona, but this is the weirdest and scariest by far, so I thought I'd share it. There is a seriously deranged person living in the Superstition Mountains. Do yourself a favor and stay as far away from those mountains as you can. I am an avid hiker, and when I can't make the hours-plus long drives up to the mountains, I enjoy nice hikes near my home. This one particular hike near my home is 5 miles in different directions, like a Goosebumps book of sorts for hiking. You can only see the trees and the greenery on one hike, or a massive waterfall on another, follow the river on another, or see the abandoned and dilapidated mills from decades ago. I went to the waterfall this time, and it was about 2.5 miles in. I sat and did some work, enjoying the serenity. When I was ready to leave, I looked around and saw a family near me. I packed my things back in my day pack as they left. I am a major people hater. I prefer to hike in areas where there are no people for miles. I chose to go a different way back to the trailhead than the way I came, because I didn't want to run into this family for the next 2.5 miles. I checked my map on my cell phone, and I found a route I could take back that seemed remote enough. I immediately noticed that this trail was not man-made, but just probably what was left after some flooding. It was going upriver anyway from the waterfall, and I was so close to the river, all I had to do was walk out onto a bent tree and I could touch the water. It was a very thin trail, not big enough for people to walk side by side, and it was covered in thick roots. I enjoyed this. It was peaceful. I passed some girls who had hooked up hammocks to read in about 20 feet to my right after I hiked this path for a little while, and I had nothing but the sound of slow-flowing river to my left, until I heard lots of footsteps coming from behind me. I didn't want to deal with people behind me, so I stepped out onto a tree that hung over the river. I waited for them to pass. It was that damn family from the waterfall. I could have sworn they went the complete opposite direction, but whatever. I waited a few minutes before I started walking again. I didn't want to run into them. Pretty soon, their voices disappeared in the distance. I was able to go back to enjoying the peace and beauty around me. I hiked for another 5 minutes or so when I had to turn a sharp corner around a boulder at a major bend in the river. This man, the father, was standing there on the other side, crouched down, like he wanted to scare me. I screamed and he laughed. I got really angry and I noticed that his family was nowhere near us. I yelled, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I didn't bother controlling my anger at being snuck up on by some stupid human. He wouldn't stop laughing. I realized that I was dealing with an idiot or a psychopath. I didn't want to deal with either, so I turned around and booked it. I could hear him behind me, following. He wasn't a very big man. He stood about 5'6" and was around 180 to 200 pounds, but he was keeping pace about 20 feet behind me. Let me tell you that this path is not for running. I very nearly went sideways into the river a few times, but this gave me a few ideas too. The routes I could mostly handle. I knew the terrain and the park pretty well. As long as I focused on my quickly placed steps around the thick root system and keeping my balance, I could make it. I was running back towards the waterfall, where surely there would be people around. It was a straight shot, but then I remembered the hammock girls. I remembered that they were slightly hidden, and if I picked up the speed, the guy behind me would miss me because of the natural curves of this path. I sprinted on the trail and burst into the hammock girls' area. I sputtered out a quick and quiet explanation, man following me. They hid me behind the lowest hammock. It took us maybe 5 to 10 seconds max to get set up. The three of us watched as this guy ran past not too long after I was safely hidden. I stayed with the girls for another few minutes, just to be safe. I explained the situation, catching my breath. I then went back the way I came from, upriver. I did not want to run into this guy again. And you think it's over? No. As I, again, hiked upriver on the trail, my original remote path back to the trailhead, I tried to calm myself down. I couldn't get my mind to stop thinking I was being followed. I just tried to hurry and get out of there as fast as I could. I turned a sharp right at the boulder that the man was hiding behind before, and kept pushing through the rough trail. I tried to focus on the sound of the river that was still on my left, but I couldn't get the sound of my heart out of my ears. The sound of my pounding heart morphed into the sound of footsteps in an instant. I realized I was being followed again. I looked back, and guess who? This damn father again. I got mad as hell. I stopped and turned around. I yelled at him to stop following me. I screamed bloody murder at him. I yelled profanities, threw a damn pine cone at him. He smiled a toothy grin and kept walking slowly towards me as it bounced off his shoulder. He wasn't fazed by any of it. He just kept smiling as if he and I were old friends. What he did not know is that I am an Army combat veteran and a domestic violence survivor. I have PTSD from both, and I have skills that many don't have. This guy chose the wrong bitch to fuck with that day. I had had enough. I already hate people enough, but this guy was just crossing a million lines, so I charged at him. He finally wiped that stupid look off his face. I was seeing red at that point, because I will not be made to feel unsafe in the only place I've felt safe since I got divorced and went to war. Seriously, fuck that guy. I ran directly at him. I knocked him down with the full force of my body, crashing into him. I screamed at him as I hit him blindly. I grabbed his hair and the waistband of the back of his pants and started dragging him to the edge of the trail. He was the one yelling at me this time. Every time he fought back, I gave him a swift kick. I gave him several explanations for why his behavior was so stupid, and then I unceremoniously kicked and pushed him into the river. I told him to cool off in the water and not to come out until I was gone. I turned back in the direction I'd been walking before and decided that I need to take another detour just to be safe by getting away from him and also to get away from people. I knew there was a trail parallel-ish to the one that I was on to my right. I looked around for a clear place to climb up the steep hill, which was mostly granite and moss and ivy. I hadn't planned on impromptu climbing that day, but whatever. I found a spot and started climbing until I got scared out of my wits by three guys just sitting in the middle of this hill on a very small, mossy flat spot, all smoking weed. They were completely hidden. Once I caught my breath again, I asked if they heard me screaming, and they said that they did, but that they thought I had covered it. I rolled my eyes and told them to kick anyone down that hill that tried to follow me, and I continued on. It took me a while to cover the 2.5 miles back to the trailhead that day, because I kept looking back, taking detours and hiding randomly. But when I did, I called the cops and alerted the park ranger about the guy. I don't know any other details on that. The cop laughed and said, "Good for you," when I told him what I did. I honestly doubt they did much because I never heard back. I've not been back to that place since, sadly. I just want to state before I finish this that I don't agree with any violence, but I wasn't getting out of there without it. I just want to hike in peace, and I would absolutely prefer it if I could do it alone and safely. Also, thank Cheez-Its for those hammock girls. And if that man is listening to this, fuck off, you creep. When I was probably 13, my family and I were on our way home from a Wednesday night church service. My mom was in the driver's seat and I was behind her in the back. My 5-year-old brother was in the middle and my 10-year-old sister was on his other side. We were just down the road from the church, but it was a country road and late, so there was no light and no one else around on the road. We were just coming up to our turn when all of a sudden a car comes swerving from our turning spot. This little car was taking the turn so fast that they came into our lane and almost hit us. We swerved as they tried to get into their own lane before we collided. Unfortunately for them, they overcorrected and their car flipped and landed on the driver's side door in the ditch. My mom of course hits the brakes and immediately jumps out of the car to go help whoever was in there. She got about 3 steps away from our car and stopped dead in her tracks. My sister and I are sitting there with our mouths hanging wide open, having no clue what to do. All I could think is, this isn't actually happening to us. This kind of stuff only happens in the movies, but why isn't my mom going to help the person? It was summer, so we all had our windows halfway down. I heard a person start yelling help from the inside, and my mom starts moving again to help him, but for some reason she stops again in the center of the road. Another car flies up behind us and the guy doesn't hesitate to jump out. He runs straight up to the crash to help. The man gets to the car and starts prying the passenger door open so the guy inside can get out. I can see my mom who wants to run and help, but it's like she can't move from that spot. The Good Samaritan that pulled up behind us is able to get the door popped open. The guy from inside crawls out the door and gets into a frog-like crouching position on top of the car. At this point, my mom starts taking shuffle steps back to the car. When I look back at the guy, he has this crazy look on his face. He looks directly at our car and my mom, and launches himself off the top of the car and hits the guy who was helping him. He starts running for our car at the same time my mom turns and runs for our car. He must have known he couldn't get there before my mom did, because he changed directions and moves to the car behind us. My mom jumps in and locks our doors just as the guy jumps in the empty driver's seat of the car behind us. He slams on the gas before he has even closed the door and almost hits us a second time before taking off. The next thing we know, the guy who was just carjacked runs up to my mom's window and starts screaming and knocking on it. My mom is of course shaken and doesn't want to roll down the window, so she settles for cracking it so she can understand what he is saying. He's yelling at us to call 911 because his phone was in the car, along with his girlfriend. So of course my mom starts searching for her cell phone, but because she's so frantic from what just happened, she can't seem to find it. So I take a break from keeping my little brother and sister calm and dial 911 on my phone and hand it to her. While she's explaining what happened to the 911 operator, we hear a woman scream down the road. The man that was at our window takes off running, and a few minutes later comes back with a severely scraped up woman in his arms that turned out to be his girlfriend. My mom unlocks the door at this point and he sets her in the passenger seat while we waited for the cops. The girlfriend told us that he noticed her while he was speeding off. He tried to hit her, but she scratched and punched at him while trying to plead with him to stop the car. He kept coming at her though, and finally rolled down the window and pushed her out going about 60. The cops finally show up and talk to all of us to get our stories. While talking to one officer, he told my mom that the man had shot and killed a man behind some apartment complex. That's why he was driving so fast and trying to get away. When we finally got to go home, we were all told to go to bed, but of course I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. I went downstairs to talk to my mom. I worked up the courage to ask her why she stopped running to the car when the other guy didn't. She told me she had such a strong feeling that she should stay in her car with us, that it was almost like she could hear it. When she heard him start yelling for help, she ran to help him again. But just like the last time, she got the overwhelming feeling not to go to the car. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if my mom hadn't listened to that feeling. The man could have easily overpowered her and gotten to the car if she had been any further away. I should also mention that the man was caught that night trying to steal a new car. He'd obviously ditched the car he stole from behind us. So the thing that really helped him get convicted was that when the woman was fighting him off, she grabbed the wrap off his head before falling out. She didn't know she did till the police got there and found it by where she was pushed out. He did go to jail, but I was never informed of how long or anything else. And honestly, I never cared to ask. So I was around 7 at the time, and it was the summer of 2011. I live in a pretty small village in France, where everyone knows each other and trusts each other. My parents were working all afternoon, and before going to work, they would drop me and my little sister off at our grandparents' house. Our cousin would also join so we could play and watch movies. It was a summer vacation, and as usual, with my cousin and my sister, both about 3 years younger than me, we took our bikes and went out to ride around where my grandparents were living. There was a field very near where we would always go, and a large place in front of it that served as parking for those who lived nearby. The place wasn't isolated. We had the order to get back home at 8 p.m. from our grandma, because that's the time where our parents would come fetch us. While we were at the place, I remember there was a woman playing with her son in front of her house with a water gun, and a red car parked in front of her house. I know this car wasn't a car from someone around, because I know that village very well, but I thought nothing of it. There was a guy sitting in the car during the whole time we were there with our bikes. That was the only thing I thought was weird. So anyway, after we finished eating at around 7 p.m., we begged our grandma to go out riding the bikes again. After lots of hugs and negotiations, she accepted, but she told us to be careful because it was getting dark, and we were to not follow or accept anything from a stranger. So we went out again. We got back to where we had been all afternoon before, but it was only my cousin, little sister, and I. I'm gonna be honest here, but for some reason I was so nervous that my stomach was hurting. I was almost crying. I didn't know why at the time, and I thought I was afraid of vomiting because my stomach was hurting, so that's why I was nervous. At that age, vomit was my absolute phobia. Now that I'm older, I can only think that what I actually was feeling was anxiety. So, while my sister and cousin were talking and riding together, I was just sitting on my bike, trying not to cry and watching them. We stayed here for a while, and as usual, we didn't watch the hour. My grandma was used to us coming back late though, but we would get scolded every time. Then, the red car appeared again, except this time, there were now 3 guys in it. They all had lots of muscles and seemed to be in their 30s. They stopped by my little sister and cousin, and being the older one, I quickly approached to see what they wanted. I was, and still am, a really shy person, so I didn't tell them to leave us alone, because at that point, something was just off and I wanted to leave. The red car stops, and the guy that was sitting behind gets out, all smiling and appearing innocent. He said to us, "Hey, I know where you live. We can give you a ride home." He was talking to us like we were babies. First big red flag. I politely tell him that no, we're fine, and that we're about to go back to our grandparents' house anyway. He became angry, and that was the second red flag. He told us that he knew our grandparents and that he was here to bring us back to them. At that point I was thinking, why would he bring us back in his car when their house is literally 5 minutes away? I asked him how he could bring us if we had bikes, and besides, there were only 2 seats free in his car. He became even more angry and told us to just get in the car. She'll sit on my lap. At that point, I don't really know. I'm thinking that maybe it's true, and he's getting impatient because we're already late. Maybe he had something else to do after bringing us back, but at the same time, I just had the word run in my head. So luckily this ends well, because it turns out we were late by a lot. Our grandmother had sent our grandfather to get us. When he arrived, he asked the guy what they were doing there. They just answered they were checking how we were and left. I told my grandpa what had happened, and I can promise you, I've never seen him so enraged before. He called them all the insults of the world and called the police right when we got home. That's when 7-year-old me understood what the fuck actually happened. I was terrified of going out for so long, and now it's okay, but I'm still so anxious about being outside, even if I am with someone. Sadly, I don't know what happened next. I don't know if these guys were ever found. I don't know if they tried kidnapping other kids. I don't know anything. I'm a 28-year-old female, and this just happened to me. I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and staff at a luxury hotel. Everyone partied, and I got into my room at about 3:27 in the morning. 15 minutes ago, a guy entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up, and I was really scared. He says someone called from my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. So basically, I'm half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table, apologizing for the inconvenience, but he is still here, and I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he's going to be in trouble and that kind of thing, how someone called and he's so sorry, and the others got in the hotel super drunk and it must have been a mistake. I swear he was standing really close to my bed for about 5 minutes. I was so shocked and I was just saying, no, it's okay. I just got scared, really, it's no problem. Just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well, asks my name. Twice, he says. Well, so, I guess I wish you a good night then. He kisses me on the cheek. He left after the longest minutes, saying he was really sorry, and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. After a short period, the phone in the room rang. I wasn't sure if I should be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I was so scared I couldn't think right. My heart was racing. After work, my coworker and I walk downtown to the park. Her bus picks her up there, and I'm meeting friends shortly for a concert. So we sat on a ledge and were chatting about work drama. The whole time we were there, a man had been about 10 feet away. He looked to be talking on the phone. After a few minutes, he starts meandering closer. My coworker pulled the mace out of her pocket and had it in her hand ready. He takes a few steps closer and stomps on the ground about a foot from us, and then he says, "Why are you scared?" My friend shoots back, "Because you're trying to scare us." He starts talking about how he would like to beat the shit out of stupid bitches. We didn't feel safe leaving. I was sure he'd follow us. He kept saying stuff like that and circling around behind us. We took the chance to get up and walk into a nearby Sephora. Huge massive props to their staff. They told us to stay as long as needed, and if he came in, to tell security immediately. We wandered around for a minute, but he was still clearly outside watching us. Finally, the manager offered to walk us out. She put herself between us and him, waited for my friend to get on her bus, and for me to get across the street for safety. Thank God for the Sephora staff. This happened to me about 5 or 6 years ago. My friends and I were freshmen in high school. We frequently went into the woods near our school and had some abandoned structures. Sometimes we went in there to smoke, graffiti, or just otherwise explore, it was always a pretty fun time. On a fall day after school, we decided to go exploring in the woods as we usually would. For the first 10 or 15 minutes into our adventure, everything was normal. Then eventually we came across a tree that had a dagger sticking out of it. I immediately got a horrible feeling. One of my friends, Nathan, went over to the tree and took the dagger out. And sure enough, it was 100% real. I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking, but part of me was hoping it was some sort of gag toy. We all just kind of looked at each other, a little weirded out, but didn't think much of it. We thought maybe someone left it there before we got to the location, so they could mess with whoever came across it. That's what we were all hoping for. Nathan put the dagger in his backpack, and off we went. It wasn't long after we came across the tree that things started to get weird. I was the first to notice it. There was a man in all black following us, keeping a good distance away. He was always to the right of us, hiding behind some trees. From what I could see, he looked to be an average height man wearing a black hoodie, black jeans, and black boots. I wanted to leave the second I saw him, but when I told my friends what I had seen, I don't think any of them believed me. They just kinda laughed it off. Either they thought I was seeing things, or they thought someone was just messing with us, and they didn't feel threatened by it. By the time we were about 40 minutes into the woods was when they finally saw him. This time he was a lot closer, about 30 feet away from us. I still couldn't make out much detail about his face, because he had his hood up and his head down, although I could see he was wearing a white t-shirt underneath his hoodie. Everyone froze for a brief moment, and we just stared, not really sure what to do with the situation. Everyone stood in silence for about 3 very long, very scary seconds, until he ran farther back down into the woods behind some trees, until we couldn't see him anymore. I grabbed onto Nathan's arm, who was the closest to me, and I said, "We have to go, now." I had a horrible pit in my stomach. At first, we made our way back to the entrance of the woods at a jogging pace. I think we were all trying to downplay the experience in our minds, to not invoke pure fear and panic. We kept at that pace for a minute or two, until we heard leaves crunching and sticks breaking behind us. We turn around, and there he is, trailing us. We start running, and he starts chasing us. I was the one behind the group, so the man was closest to me. I could hear his heavy breathing. That's how close he was to me, an arm's length away. We picked up our speed, and I thought for sure I was going to pass out because I was fairly out of shape, but luckily we made it out in about 25 minutes, stopping once or twice to catch our breath when the man wasn't in sight. Once we all got out, we just kind of looked at each other, trying to figure out what just happened. We didn't talk about it much after that. I don't think any of us wanted to think about it for too long. Looking back on it now, we probably should have reported it to the police, in case that man tried to hurt any other innocent kids going into those woods. But unfortunately, the thought didn't cross our minds. I don't know if it was him who placed the dagger in the tree, or why it was there. Honestly, I don't want to think about it. I don't know why he was there or what his intentions were. I'm just glad we got away. I hope he hasn't hurt or tried to hurt anyone since. This was about 10 years ago, but I remember it clearly. At the time I was working swing shift, so I would get off of work downtown at 12 a.m. and I had to wait 30 minutes for a bus. That took an additional 30 minutes to get to the stop closest to my house. It was a little under a mile away. I rode this bus every night, and it was usually fairly empty, aside from myself and a few other people getting off retail jobs, who I'd see pretty often. But I was at the last stop on the line, and I usually was the last person on the bus. This night, the same people as always got on the bus and got off at their regular stops. The second to last stop, I noticed that another guy was still on the bus, another guy I'd never seen before, and I saw that he was watching me. I was 18 years old at the time, dressed in sorta junky clothes, but still occasionally drew the attention of creeps on the bus because I was a girl alone, late at night. Whatever, I thought to myself. I'd usually just tell creepy guys to piss off, and at the very worst, they'd say to me, "You're a bitch," and that was the end of that. By 18, I dealt with it plenty of times, so I wasn't particularly upset by this. But this creepy guy was sort of different. He was an overweight guy dressed in a knit sweater, slacks, and wireframe glasses. He didn't say a word the entire time we were on the bus. He just stared, never breaking his gaze, just transfixed on me. Finally, we get to my stop, the last stop. He was still sitting in the back of the bus, watching me as I got off. I thanked the bus driver, got off, and realized that this guy was still on the bus. I started walking up the hill to my house like I always do, and I noticed that the bus was still sitting at the top, instead of pulling out and putting on its to-terminal sign like it normally did. Weird, sure, but I kept walking. I'd made it about 500 feet. I heard the bus pull out and drive off, and then I heard someone running up behind me. Without even looking back, I knew it was the guy from the bus. He was 50 feet behind me at this point. I could hear him having to catch his breath, and he yelled out, "Princess, please wait." And of course I didn't wait. I just kept going, but he didn't stop. He kept yelling, "Please, please, princess, I want to make love to you. I have money, please, I will pay you." I didn't stop walking. I didn't want to make eye contact or acknowledge him, but I'm also walking down a dark street with no cars and no people. He is hot on my trail. He can't keep up with me and he seems pretty winded. By the time I made it down the block, he was yelling at the top of his lungs, "Princess, princess, please let me make love to you. I will pay you. Just stop. Princess, please, please." And then he started sobbing, absolutely wailing, all while yelling that he wanted to make love to me and he would pay me for it. He kept calling me princess. He wouldn't stop sobbing and he was so loud, I'm surprised he didn't wake anyone in the neighborhood up. At this point, he's still 50 feet behind me and crying. I was 5 blocks from my house. I didn't want this guy to know where I lived, so I decided to call 911. He kept loudly crying and sobbing and pleading to me. I let the dispatcher know that some guy was following me and propositioning me and crying. She could hear him sobbing in the background and said a deputy would be there soon. I yelled at the guy, "I just called the cops, so leave me alone." And he just stopped, standing there, sobbing. I keep walking, but slowly, since I'm so close to my house. A couple of minutes pass and there's lights. A sheriff was coming down the street, and when I turned around, the crying guy was nowhere to be found. The officer asked if I wanted him to go look for him, or if I just wanted a ride home. I didn't ever want to deal with that guy again, so I accepted the ride and asked him to just check out the area around my house after he dropped me off. Since it is pretty unusual to see a guy in a sweater and slacks wandering around crying at 1:30 in the morning on a weeknight in a residential area, I have no idea if they found him. No idea what would happen if they did find him, since I'm not sure if anything he did was actually illegal or just creepy as hell. Needless to say, I deadbolted my house and stayed up all night talking to a friend in a different time zone until it was morning. So to start, my parents have always taught me how to be independent. I live 30-ish minutes away from New York City by train, so I was taught not to be afraid of the subway systems. I quickly learned how to find my way around New York City and my town in Jersey via public transportation. I was always checking in with my parents, whether I was going to practice or a movie with my friends, so it was never a big deal. Anyway, a few weeks prior to the incident, the internet in our house wasn't working. I needed the computer to finish some research paper. Since the library was closed, my older brother took me to this internet cafe a few blocks away from our house. While there, my brother was talking to his friend Charles. He introduced us both. Little did I know, this Charles guy was about to save my life. This cafe was on the main street of my town, and there was a bus stop a block away from the cafe. A few weekends after meeting Charles, my friends invited me to go bowling in the city. My parents said okay. I was 14, so obviously I had to ask for permission. I was on my way around noon. We bowled, got pizza, talked about my friend's new puppy. Typical girl things. Everything was fine until I was making my way back home. At 3 p.m., there were delays with the subway system. Instead of waiting it out, I decided I could just take another subway home. It would drop me off at the Newark Penn Station. After that, it would be one bus ride away from home. No problem. So at 3:15, I'm on the subway and I notice this man staring at me. It creeps me out, but it's nothing new with New York City. I ignored him. At 3:50 p.m., I arrive at Newark Penn Station, and this man sees me get up to go. He makes eye contact, smiles, and then hurries behind me. Mind you, I was a young small girl at the time. I was an easy target. He's creepy. I decided to walk fast and get lost in the crowds. The doors open. I speed walk through people. This dude must have had 20/20 vision, because as soon as I arrived at my bus stop, he was right behind me. At 4 p.m.-ish, I'm sitting next to an elderly-looking lady at the bus stop. The creepy man is pacing back and forth less than 10 feet away from me. He looks at me, smiling, pacing the floor. Every part of my body is saying, "Run now, he is bad news." But there's nowhere to go. And somehow, sitting next to this older lady made me feel safer. I take my phone out to text my mom. It's Dad. Wonderful. Thankfully, more people have arrived at this bus stop, and I feel better. There are witnesses around. He can't do anything, but he's still staring and pacing back and forth. At 4:15, the bus finally arrives. I get in and sit as close to the bus driver as possible. I don't know why I didn't tell the bus driver what was happening. I was young, scared, naive, and I didn't want to burden the driver. Stupid, I know now. My stop is the very last one, so I thought, the creepy guy has to get off the bus before me. There's no way he's gonna stay until the end. Many bus stops later, this guy is still on the bus. He did this creepy thing. Whenever the bus stopped, he would get up with everyone else, and instead of getting off the bus, he would sit closer and closer to the front. There are fewer and fewer people on the bus, so I realize this guy's getting off whenever I get off the bus. This means, if I get off at my stop, he can follow me home, find out where I live. Or maybe I'll never get home. At 5 p.m., there are only 2 bus stops separating me and my house. This guy, a lady, and I are the last ones inside the bus at this point. I decide I'm getting out early because I'm not having this guy know where I live. I get off the bus stop early. He sees me and follows me. I pick up speed. He picks up speed. Fuck it. I run. He's running after me. Mid-panic, I remember the cafe. It closes soon. I'm a block away. I run for my life to the cafe, and this guy's right behind me. As I'm approaching it, I see Charles outside locking up the place. He sees me and knows there's something wrong. I guess he sees the fear in my face, and this grown man running after young me. I get to him. Charles immediately pushes me inside the cafe and locks the door behind us. This creep is locked outside. My heart is pounding. I quickly tell Charles that this random guy has been following me across 3 towns, and that I was scared. He calls the cops. The guy is staring inside the cafe, and I'm staring back at him, protected by the locked yet clear glass door. I had to remember it. The creep smiles and walks away as if nothing had happened. Little did I know that Charles' uncle's a cop in our town. A few minutes later, the cop shows up. After describing him in vivid details, it takes them minutes to catch this creep still walking down the main street. We later find out that this creepy guy had a warrant out for his arrest for armed robbery, and he had prior accounts of sexual assault. Had it not been for Charles, I don't know what would have happened to me that day. Thanks for saving my life. And no, this did not deter me from public transportation or from exploring the city alone. My parents did freak out and got me maced though. As an adult, I travel all over the world, sometimes alone, but I am hyper aware of my surroundings because of what happened at 14. I was around 16 at the time of this happening. Firstly, I'd like to explain what type of person I am, so my actions make a bit of sense. I'm an average-looking girl, and a bit overweight, which for my country makes me really undesirable. For this reason, I'm not used to men hitting on me. I didn't even consider it a possibility back then. You can say that I'm usually the man in our friend group. You know, the girl that looks after every other friend when they're drinking, and if a guy's being rude or harassing someone, I'm the one to shut him down. I don't know why I took on this role, probably because my friends are way too naive and nice. Well, I'm like that to strangers when I'm alone. I always try to be helpful to people if they look confused or ask me for directions or anything else. On this particular night, I was going home from school. My high school is in the city center and I take the bus home, since the buses get overcrowded during peak hours, and I really hate being between crowds of people. I normally wait around 30 minutes to an hour to catch the bus. This night, I walked to another bus stop, around 5 stops before the one to my school. I wanted to kill time and take an empty bus. It was dark and I was the only one at that stop. I usually don't have a problem with going out alone late at night, as I don't have the man bad assault mentality drilled into me. So I'm just minding my own business when this 45 to 50-year-old man comes up to me. He has a very friendly face and smile, so I don't think anything of it. He asks me something and I realize he's Turkish. I tell him I don't understand, so he uses basic Bulgarian words he knows, and I somehow understand that he's just asking for directions. Of course, I try my best to explain, and after I feel like he understood, I expect him to just stop talking to me. No, he sat disturbingly close to me and started talking to me, again in Turkish. I try to be polite and ignore him the best I can while nodding my head with a smile, looking at the timetable. For some reason, this guy starts asking for my phone number. At this moment, I realized that he was not just a lost foreigner. I try to shut him down, saying I don't have a phone. Now don't ask why, I thought that was going to work. I finally give in and tell him a random phone number. He says something else to me in Turkish, and then the worst thing happens. All this time, I'm looking at the time the bus will come in. I'm praying for him to please not try to call the number. Well, he does. He shows me and asks why my phone isn't ringing. My stomach dropped. I try to think of something fast. Then I remembered that I have my old Motorola phone in my bag. I usually brought it to school to give it to teachers who collected phones during class. I also like to play games on it. Fortunately, the battery was dead, so I just pretended that that was the reason the call wasn't going through. I see this guy try to argue, but at that moment the bus came and I got on it. I sit on the seat behind the driver as always. After 10 minutes, I get this weird feeling. I don't know what it was, but I felt watched. I look around, but since I'm in the front seat, I can't exactly see everything. Luckily, our buses have this gigantic mirror on the inside. It shows the whole bus. I look into it and I can clearly see him. He's sitting on the last seat, his legs clearly visible. I'm starting to panic. I'm still not sure he's following me, but I'm also a very cautious person, so I really can't ignore this. I kept checking on him at every stop and he was still there. I get paranoid and say fuck it and get off the bus. The stop was at our local mall, and luckily it was open until 10 p.m. I decide to go in, and if he follows, then I'll try to sneak out. He follows all right. You have to understand that in my town, almost nobody goes out after 9 p.m. The mall is close to empty. I look around, thinking of ways to disappear on him, but there's just no way. The mall's an open space. There are 3 floors, all almost empty. I'd be easily spotted anywhere. Now, you'll probably say, you should have asked the security for help. No, in Bulgaria we don't do that. The thought of doing it never even crossed my mind. Security is just some grandpa that walks around all day. They don't actually do work or anything. If it were today, I might not be as stupid. But back then, this wasn't even an option in my head. And besides, security wasn't even around. So I do the most logical thing I can do, and I decided to utilize the knowledge I had acquired in the previous week. You see, the mall had a cool corridor system behind the stores. It was completely unmarked by any signs, and if you didn't know where you were going, you'd probably get lost. It's just endless white corridors that lead to empty rooms for storage or some other stuff. Well, me, being an avid anime fan, loved going around these corridors and pretending I'm some sort of ninja from Naruto on a mission, so I can proudly say that I learned the right path back to the stairway of the mall, because I was smart, and maybe a little obsessed with the idea of being a spy. I decided to lure this creepy guy in the corridors, and then just walk out from the back end of the mall. First I entered H&M and pretended to look around, just to see if he was really stalking me. He didn't even try to hide it. He stood outside the store, just staring in at me. I got scared for a second, but then I remembered I'm the best 007 agent out there. I just continued walking around the mall. I finally entered the corridors, and at this point, I booked it to the staircase. I ran out and didn't stop running for 2 bus stops. I tried looking back, but there was no one. I proudly decided I was a hero and went home. Today, being a 21-year-old grown-up, I just think about how stupid that was, and how I'd probably be 10 times as scared today than I was back then. Well, I hope it never comes to that. This particular story is from the time when I was living in India. I was living in a wonderful neighborhood in Mumbai, and I truly loved my life there. Although I had already had several encounters reinforcing some of the stereotypes you might hear of, like harassment in the street. Having spent most of my life living in major cities around the world, I'm no stranger to this. So I know it's not okay, but it doesn't rattle me as much as it used to. In this particular neighborhood, there was a market area about 10 minutes walking distance from my flat. That's where the vegetable stalls were, some restaurants, household goods, and even a gym. The area was always extremely crowded with both pedestrians and car traffic. Pretty soon after I began visiting for shopping, I noticed a young man who appeared to live on the streets near the gym. He stood out because he had a bit of a habit approaching people in the crowd, tapping them, and then disappearing quickly back into the crowd. I couldn't even venture a guess as to how many times he appeared out of nowhere, tapping me on the leg, shoulder, back, or wherever, just for me to see his very recognizable long wiry hair disappearing into the crowd. At a certain point, he began carrying around a long whip. This is a technique some of the local beggars use to do a trick in order to ask for money. I found it to be extremely threatening. I was always on the lookout for this man because I didn't like him touching me. And when I saw him, I would cross the street. Sometimes he would follow me and do it anyway. Sometimes he didn't. One night I was walking home after a trip to the market, and as usual, I was keeping my eyes out for the man. I saw him and we made eye contact. He was on the other side of the street and headed directly for me. I walked faster and put some cars in between us, but he caught up to me and grabbed my chest. That was definitely something new. As usual, he took off right away. I felt disgusted and tried to hurry home, carrying my packages. Traffic was bad that night, so I wasn't able to walk directly to my flat. I had to walk straight for longer than usual, and then take a turn across the street that I normally don't. When I looked over my shoulder to check for cars behind me, I saw the young man following me, about 5 meters behind. I panicked. Less than a week before, I had been involved in a serious and violent sexual assault attack. My mind went completely blank with fear, and I power walked to the nearest store and went inside. The shopkeepers must have been so confused as to why there was a crying woman with a grocery bag in a clothing store. I called my boss and asked her to come meet me. Sitting in the store, trying to calm myself down, I could see the young man just pacing outside the door, watching me. It felt like an eternity before my boss arrived, and by then, the man had left. We walked home together, and for the next 2 days, I had a police escort any time I left my house, until they caught the man. It turns out, he had previously followed another one of my colleagues home and attacked her outside of her apartment by pulling a bag over her head. I'm so glad I looked over my shoulder at the time I did. He was arrested after that incident, but after being released, he found his way back to the same intersection and started up the same antics. This happened almost a year ago, and it's all thanks to my little shit of a husky. She was a super cute 10-pound fluff ball at the time this happened. I was living in a pet-friendly apartment complex and I had just bought her. I picked her up at around 10 that morning and went to visit my parents' house so they could meet her. I stayed all day and didn't arrive home until 8:30 p.m. We walked in and I introduced her to the apartment, played with her, took her to pee and then went to bed. During the night, she woke me up twice to pee and whined a bit since she was in a new environment. But she wasn't too loud and I quickly calmed her down by putting her on my bed. She crawled on my head and fell asleep. Since I read that huskies are very active dogs, I decided to take her on a first walk on the sidewalk beside the building. As we started our walk, we passed the side of the building that shows the balconies. I lived on the 3rd floor, and the guy who lives directly below me was standing on his balcony, filming me on his phone. I felt a bit weird about it, but I didn't think too much about it since the landlord has actually told me before. He mentioned to her that he enjoyed me living above because I was quiet. A lot of tenants in the complex were having a fit over my husky. They would hold her and pet her whenever they saw her. I thought he was just filming her to show his friends or to talk about her later with me. I spent the whole day with her and getting her familiar with me and her new home. Night rolls around and I took her out before I went to bed at around 11:30. I walked past a red car that was running, but it didn't have its lights on, so I couldn't see who was in the car. I didn't think much about it because it wasn't unusual for people to sit in their cars, waiting on someone. I lived right beside a college and have had many college students living in the building, so I thought maybe they were waiting for someone so they could head off to a party or something. Well, I didn't think much of it. I was still aware of my surroundings since I'm a young woman alone at night. My puppy finally used the bathroom after 20 minutes of sniffing around. I picked her up and walked past the car to go inside. The driver's side suddenly opens and a tall man steps out and yells, "Are you allowed to have that dog?" in an almost aggressive tone. I turned around and noticed it was my neighbor and replied, "Oh yeah, you're allowed to have dogs here." I was confused as to why he was asking that since he lived here longer than me, but I answered him anyway. He points at my dog. "No, you dumb bitch. Did you get permission from the landlord to have that thing?" As soon as he cursed at me, I clenched the dog closer to my chest and just nodded, still confused and now a bit frightened. "Seriously, I know you're lying, bitch. You don't have permission. I videotaped you this morning and sent it to the landlord. She said she had no clue about her. I know he's lying because I did tell her about my dog, but I just hadn't paid the deposit yet since it was the weekend and she was fine with that. So I explained to him, but he cursed at me more, calling me a lying bitch and how he kept him up all day and night with her running around and stomping. I know that was impossible because a dog of her size can't stomp or make noise to keep him up all night. She hasn't barked or howled once and just whines at times, but that still isn't loud enough to keep him up all night, especially since I was asleep next to her and I slept fine. I finally interrupted and apologized to cut the conversation short because he was just getting more angry as it went on. He paused and said, "Shut the fuck up. You don't mean that. I'm calling the landlord tomorrow to report you and your dog. I swear, if she keeps me up again tonight, I will fuck you and her up, bitch." I freeze at that point because I knew he meant it. Even though we never had any problems until that day, I've heard him harassing other neighbors and even pulled a gun out over one of their dogs. However, because he's buddy-buddy with the landlord, as in doing drugs and probably sex, he's never gotten into trouble. Despite me being scared, my dumb ass suddenly gets pissed off for getting threatened for no reason, and I stammered out, "I have permission to have this dog, so I'll be with you there tomorrow when you try to report me. You're lying and upset because you hate dogs even though you live in a pet-friendly apartment, which was a stupid move on your part." Suddenly, the passenger door slings open, and a woman steps out and shouts, "Bitch, just go on before we beat your ass. You ain't gonna do shit tomorrow, but get rid of that damn dog." I didn't know there was someone else in this car, as I was standing closer to the driver's side. My fear completely took over, and I just ran away and into the building. I was on the second floor landing when I hear the lobby's door slam and footsteps pounding up the stairs. I let out a scream and hurried up to the third floor, down the hallway, and into my apartment. I locked all the locks and put my door stopper against the doorknob. From outside my window, closer towards the end of the hall, I hear laughter, and then they walked away. I locked myself in my bedroom and cuddled my puppy as I cried. I stayed up all night, afraid they would break in and kill me and my dog. The next day, I called my mom to pick me up and didn't come back until 2 weeks later when I moved out. I brought all of my male cousins for extra protection that day. In the end, I had to move back in with my parents because I'm afraid to be out on my own now. I ended up getting my deposit and last month's rent back. I never reported the couple because I didn't know their names, and I just didn't want to get involved with them anymore. Looking back, I wonder if I could have sued. Anyways, to the crazy-ass couple who ran me out of my apartment, my 10-pound husky is now 60 pounds and will lick you to death. Last May, my husband, myself, and our 2 small boys left our little farm in the country and moved into a posh, boutique-style urban apartment building. My husband had recently received a sizable raise after many years with his current company, and we wanted to be closer to his office and to mine. We chose this particular building as it was brand new and offered an array of shopping, eating, and outdoor amenities without ever having to leave the building or surrounding shopping center. We quickly settled in and started enjoying the new change of pace. At first, everything was fine, but about 3 months into our lease, we noticed that the front office completely changed staff. We were upset about the change because 2 of the receptionists had been personal friends of ours. We asked them why everyone had been let go, but they said they didn't know why. Apparently corporate just had decided they wanted a change. We were sad to see our friends go, especially our 2- and 3-year-old boys who had grown quite fond of their daily visit to the office for milk and cookies. We also noticed that the new staff was mainly comprised of much younger, attractive women. We assumed then that the management company intended to appeal to the college crowds and singles. We were slightly annoyed with the general lack of experience in customer service, but thought that it wasn't the end of the world and moved on. Then weird stuff started happening. One morning I walked into the living room to find our patio door wide open. It seemed odd because we triple lock it to keep the children from accessing the patio unsupervised. I locked the door and accused my husband of being absent-minded and leaving it open. He swore that he hadn't touched the door or locks in days, and I let it go. But I made a mental note to start checking it every night before bed, just in case. About 2 weeks later, I awoke to the sound of my oldest boy screaming for me somewhere outside the apartment. When I found him, he was wandering the hallway outside, soaked in urine and utterly terrified. At the time, we were absolutely baffled how he managed to unlock the 2 doors and a child-proof lock cover. When we asked him what happened, he said that a monster was in his room looking at him. He didn't want to move, so he peed in the bed. Honestly, I was so happy he was safe that I just chalked it up to kid imagination and my husband not locking the door properly again. It never crossed my mind that someone had potentially been inside the apartment and let him out. They would have had to open the door from the outside, and only we have a key. Weird stuff like that kept happening for several more months, and we kept finding reasonable excuses that explained everything away. Then one afternoon, I got a phone call from the office of our apartment. We had recently installed a Ring doorbell to alert us when someone was at the door. It was mostly an attempt to prevent another runaway toddler. The woman from the office asked me if our door camera was operational, or if we just put it there to make people think we had security. I informed her that it was 100% operational, and that we had installed video surveillance in our nursery and the adjoining bathroom to keep the kids safe. She then asked me a really odd question. She wanted to know if I would add her to our security devices so that she could view our Ring footage. Of course, I politely told her that was not going to happen. I asked her why she wanted it, but I never got a clear answer. I told my husband about the call later that night. He agreed that we should make an effort to always keep the Ring charged and record to the cloud. We did, and things seemed fine for a while. Over the course of our lease, the doors have continued to occasionally magically come unlocked and open, even locks that the kids can't reach, and it's always overnight or we notice them when we get home from work. About 2 months ago, things started going missing from the apartment. At first it was little things like a new tube of Dior mascara or a $20 bill left on the kitchen island. My husband and I thought it might be the baby storing them somewhere like treasures. He sometimes does that with my husband's golf balls, so it wasn't too far-fetched. Then bigger, more expensive items started disappearing. Our iPad vanished from my nightstand. A leather jacket with a designer label no longer hung from its hanger on the side of my closet. A bra, still with tags, was absent from one of my dresser drawers, and a full bottle of prescription painkillers was nowhere to be found. So was a half bottle of my anxiety meds. We now began to suspect that something really weird was happening in our apartment, but we had no proof. The nursery and the bathroom cameras didn't show anything during the day, and we started making our boys sleep in bed with us at night, the bedroom door locked from the inside. I could swear that I woke up in the middle of the night once to a slight thudding noise and saw the shadows of movement on the other side of the door, but I fell back asleep before I could register what was happening. I take a Tylenol most nights before bed, so while I do wake up at the slightest noise, staying awake is a battle of its own. This is our last month at these apartments. In 2 weeks we will be moving into our own home. 2 weeks ago I obtained a money order for the last month's rent. It was a large money order and had to be halved in 2. As always, I brought it home, along with the receipt, and placed them into the plastic magnet sleeve attached to the freezer that also housed our monthly invoice. Now, I don't know how to fill out a money order. I know how stupid that is, but I never worried about it since my husband usually fills them out and pays our rent. It's not that I can't learn, but I'm lazy and don't mind letting him do it. That means the money order in the rent sleeve was blank. And guess what? It went missing too. A novice mistake, I know, but thank God for online banking. One call to our bank and an investigation had begun. We waited with unease until this afternoon, when a representative from the company that issued the money order gave us a call. The call was to inform us that the order had been cashed out and that the thief was identified. Sure enough, it was one of the receptionists in our building, the same young woman who had called to ask about our new security devices. She had been using the spare maintenance keys to come inside of our apartment whenever she wants. I will take this information to the building's manager. At the moment we aren't pressing charges as long as our conditions are met. I hope this young lady gets help, because we don't think she's malicious, just a thief and a grade A creeper. Tonight will be the last night here. As far as her watching my children sleep goes, I cannot say I'll be comfortable having them sleep away from me for a good while. I feel terrible for not believing my son. I tear up just thinking how scared he really must have been. The new house will get a full security system with every bell and whistle. We still aren't sure how she got past the Ring camera without being seen, but my husband is dead set on figuring it out. Recently, when the pandemic began, my neighbor's son, who was roughly in his mid-30s, moved in with her. Her son plus the pandemic has obviously limited our interaction with her to almost zero, and my family and I were happy to both not be bothered by her anymore, and that she was no longer home alone throughout the pandemic. But our peacefulness didn't last that long. Around March, when the weather was getting warm, my family and I were sitting in the living room watching a show together. Usually when we were in the living room and it's cool outside, we will leave the door open to let some air in. We're literally right there, keeping an eye out on the door. Everything was fine and we watched 2 episodes, until I noticed my dad started to turn to look out the door frequently, making me feel uneasy, but I just thought he saw someone that he recognized. 5 minutes of him continuing to look towards the door passed by, until he gets up and shuts the door, immediately locking it. My sister and I look at him confused, and our dad tells us that our neighbor's son had been standing outside, looking directly inside the house for a while. This was obviously odd, but my sister and I just brushed it off as him being as nosy as his mother, and we continued watching the rest of whatever episode we were on in the show. Some time passed by and my sister and I go to our rooms, which I immediately knock out because I'm not a night owl. Tonight was one of those rare nights where my sister and I slept with our windows open to let some air in. We usually just blasted the AC. At around 2 a.m., I wake up to hearing creaking outside my door and loud music being played outside. I usually sleep with my door closed, and creaking is normal to happen in the house since it is pretty old. I try to dismiss it and return to sleep until I hear my sister whisper my name from the other side of my door. I get up annoyed and open the door to see my sister visibly shaking and scared. I immediately get shaken up because my sister isn't known for being jumpy. I am. My sister whispered to me how she had heard footsteps outside her window, pacing back and forth for a while, and then walking in and out of the neighbor's house. My sister, annoyed, looked out the window and saw that it was our neighbor's son. A few minutes passed and suddenly loud music started playing outside of our windows. She mentioned how she felt uneasy and just laid in her bed until she saw the light of a flashlight shining into her window. Thankfully, we both had blackout curtains, but the fact that this guy was shining a flashlight into her window, rightfully so, freaked her out. We live on the 2nd story, so there is no way someone just happened to shine a flashlight upwards towards our window on the 2nd floor. My sister and I stand in the hallway, debating on what to do, until we decided to go wake my dad up, who was already awake due to the loud music our neighbor's son started playing at 2 a.m. Once we tell my dad everything, he immediately gets out of bed and goes to our rooms to help us shut our windows. The odd thing is, the second my neighbor's son heard my dad's voice when he was in our rooms, the music suddenly shut off, and we heard him go back inside of his house. My sister and I have a feeling the reason he was playing his music so loud was to drown out whatever noise he was making or was gonna make, and that thought is horrifying to think about. Now, about 3 weeks ago, a new event occurred with said neighbor's son. Ever since the last thing happened, my sister and I had not opened our windows at all because that was very unsettling and we didn't want anything repeating itself with different outcomes. But one afternoon, it started to rain so hard, and the gutters were clogged up, causing the rain to get into the house, and for some reason, specifically in my room. After the rain had stopped, I had to sleep with my window open to let everything dry out to avoid mold. Hesitantly, I slept with it open. I convinced myself that nothing was going to happen because it was wet outside. but I still slept with my pepper spray on the nightstand. Thankfully, I slept through the night without interruptions. I woke up in line with my usual routine. At around 9, when I'm in my bedroom trying to enjoy my coffee, I suddenly hear a lot of noise right outside my window. There was so much noise that even my sister woke up and came into my room confused. We both just froze listening, trying to not even breathe too loud, until we hear a familiar noise causing us to both look at each other to confirm it. This man had a ladder up against his mom's house. It was just the right height of my window. My sister and I immediately leave my room, slamming the door behind us to let him know we were there. We did let my dad know, and my sister and I have a picture of him on the ladder right next to my window. We're not sure what to do since his behavior is creepy, but not enough for us to get anyone involved. We don't even know whether or not we should bring it up to our neighborhood, in case our son will take it wrongly and do something worse. This happened about 10 years ago, while I was in my last year of college. My friend and I were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a very safe and slightly upscale part of town. To give you an image of us, at the time I was about 210 pounds, 5'7", and fairly capable of handling myself as I had been an athlete for a large portion of my life, but I had succumbed to food addiction. My roommate was 5'3" and 115 pounds. She never lifted weights in her entire life. One day I was cooking up something for dinner, and my roommate came in and went to her room. We weren't lovey-dovey kind of roommates, so it wasn't unusual for us not to make small talk every time we saw each other. I went on cooking, and about 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I went around the island and opened the door, expecting a delivery person. Instead, I was gripped with this intense, visceral sense of unease. It wrapped around my body like a vice. Every hair on my body stood up. There was a totally normal-looking guy standing there, medium height, brown hair, wearing a baseball cap, casual sweater, and pants. To this day, I couldn't identify him from a lineup, but I just recall he looked totally unremarkable. However, I have never in my life felt such a sense of foreboding. My heart was beating out of my chest. I didn't even say a word. I just stared at him, vaguely wondering if I should shut the door in his face. He stared at me for a few moments, then turned and walked away, his dog following behind him. I'd been so fixated on this guy, I hadn't even realized he'd been holding a dog leash attached to a sweet-looking golden retriever. My anxiety abated, and I decided I had been overreacting, despite never having that particular feeling before. I had grown up as a tomboy, had mostly guy friends growing up. I was in a hugely male-dominated career and degree, and played a male-dominated sport most of my life. I was not, and have never been, in the least, afraid of men. About 30 minutes later, my roommate came out and asked me who was at the door. I said, "Oh, just some random guy. Wrong apartment, apparently." She looked at me, frowning, and asked, "Did he have a dog?" I replied, "Affirmative. He had a dog." She told me that some guy with a dog had tried to chat to her up at the mailboxes on the other side of the complex, but she had ignored him and gotten back into her car to come here. She's positive he couldn't have seen her come into this apartment, because number 1, he would have had to run at super speed to catch her up. Number 2, our apartment faces away from the section where the mailboxes are. And number 3, there are at least 4 buildings obscuring line of sight to our building. What that means is he scoured the parking lots for her car, and when he saw her car parked in front of our apartment building, he had likely knocked on each door to try to find her. Our suspicions were confirmed the next day, when there was a phone number with no name under her windshield. I have no idea if she ever reported the incident, but I was on edge for a good month afterwards because I was worried he might keep an eye out for her. I don't know why he turned around and left. Maybe he thought he had the wrong apartment, or maybe he assumed she lived alone and didn't want to confront someone else. Maybe as much as my roommate's tiny size enticed him, my larger size made him think twice about doing anything. To this day, I've only ever gotten that sensation one other time while I was out with my boyfriend at a bar about a year ago. A guy who wasn't even looking at me made me feel really uneasy, and the same tension had wound through my body. The man looked completely ordinary as well, but my instincts were just lashing back at him. Considering the incident with the first guy, I knew to trust my instincts and asked to go to another bar. Maybe I have a sixth sense for crazy people, but I decided I would never question my subconscious instincts again. I hope to never experience that sensation in the future. When I was a kid, I lived in a kind of sketchy neighborhood. A lot of the houses were trailers perched on top of hollow concrete foundations, and any real houses were in need of some fixing up. One day, a new neighbor moved in. She was a couple years younger than me. We'll call her Ellen. She was always joining in on whatever I was doing and coming over to see if I was there with no warning. There weren't too many nice kids in the neighborhood, so I understand where she was coming from to an extent. Except, she didn't seem to have the same idea of fun. A lot of my memories from that time are a little fuzzy, but here's what I remember. Ellen was very aggressive. She'd get angry if I ever told her no, and almost every time I went to her house, I could hear her screaming at her parents, and later, her dog. She was always very loud in general, and seemed to enjoy making me flinch. I've never been a fan of loud voices when they're unneeded. I would also find things missing from my room, only to see them in hers. Things like friendship bracelets, stones I'd found, and small toys. Whenever I pointed them out to her, she'd go silent and let me get them back, staring at me like I'd wronged her somehow. She unnerved me, to be honest. When we went frog hunting, there were a few times she pulled the legs off of the frogs, and her dog seemed scared of her. I'd also sometimes find dead birds and squirrels on my front steps, their legs, heads, or wings missing. They were all over her yard too, but she blamed her cat. I never ever saw a cat. I remember hearing a couple different names for it. I can't be sure it was her, of course, but that little voice in my head thinks so. My cat definitely killed mice too, but I'd never seen her do it so brutally before, or tearing off any pieces. She'd run into my mom sometimes when she was looking for me, and my lovely mother has told me she'd ask to come in anyway and wait in my room when I wasn't there. The answer was no, always, for pretty obvious reasons. Our fence to the backyard was high, and there wasn't a way to climb it. It was about 6 feet, nice new wood, with a latch only on the backyard side. Our trash and recycling bins were about 10 to 15 feet away by our front shed. We started finding them right against the fence, and eventually my mom caught Ellen peeking over the fence when she was out back cleaning our little pool. I also found Ellen lurking by the fence coming home from school one day when she was supposed to be sick. I always just got a horrible feeling being around her, like if I did something wrong or mentioned what I caught her doing, something bad would happen to me. We moved away about 1.5 years after she moved in, I think. I have no idea what's up with her now. I haven't thought about Ellen in years. But driving past the old neighborhood a while ago, it all came back. It's hard for me to write this. It started in 2014 and it happened in my home country of Sweden, when I went to an art school for a summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at this school were some of the worst people I have ever met, and that included me because I was kind of a thrash back then. I was 21 years old and had little experience of the real world. I had gone 2 extra years of schooling because of switching majors and taking an extra year on my second choice, so I was basically on my first year of independence. I also have a light form of autism and didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me mentally develop a bit more slowly during high school. Basically, I was a 21-year-old with very little experience in life. The people I met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of achievers. They were some of the meanest and most terrible people I have ever met. They treated each other and me awfully, as well as the teachers, but I was quite a little shit too. In fact, I feel like being around those people also made me worse. What started the stalking was an incident involving acrylic paint. It was going to be thrown away, so some of us took some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. Well, Anna showed up, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive designer clothes, stood in her way. So my art teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it." Anna snaps towards her with this crazy look in her eyes and shouts, "Excuse me, do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responds with, "Okay, famous woman, move it." That was how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people of my class schmooze over her and treat her like a celebrity, but her real reason for being there was because of her paint. So the great hunt began. I was roped into it, and my initial plan was just to give her paint back so she could be off. Except during the hunt, I got these terrifying red flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people to see if any were hers. Apparently she had poured some kind of oil into the paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt, she admitted that she'd been put into treatment for the criminally insane because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she got the video, and she said that her dad had connections with the local government, which had gotten the videotape from one of the local government cameras. During this time, she even showed me the court document which she had saved as a PDF on her phone. She also admitted that she'd been sending messages to a famous artist in Örebro because a voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with her career. Anna also thought that staring wide-eyed made her more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So while she was saying all of this, she had this crazy-eyed look on her face. I was terrified of her and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she did find all of her paint, she put it in one of the school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come every year to the art exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy person. End of story, right? How I wish. About 2 years later, I enrolled in a 1-year basic art program at the school. I had completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms, and her paint was brought up again. It would again be thrown away. Me, not remembering that crazy, famous artist, took a nice crimson bottle for myself, while others took some of the not ruined color for themselves. Then, as we all tried to continue with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the colors. I didn't recognize her at all, and had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I'd even forgotten that I took that crimson color from her paint. So when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her paint at some other girl's table and was harassing her as well. Thinking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint, and that's when everything went to hell, and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out that I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the art school, specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible people that this was true, and then harassment followed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, when this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Anna was fake crying in the corner, but I could see her when I was on the floor. How she went from fake crying to gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another girl she had recruited picked up and smashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stormed off and the second girl followed, I stumbled onto my feet and asked Anna why she had done this. The answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. "So you can know that I can hurt you if I want." That was the answer she gave me. I later asked the brute why he'd attacked me, and he said that he hated people who stole. I had bruised my ribs but was not allowed to go to the hospital. The principal didn't want to get involved, and since my phone was broken, I couldn't call for an ambulance. It took so long to get to the hospital that the outside signs of abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it, and also said she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation to maybe smooth everything over. Well, Anna is not like normal people, and certainly does not think like normal people. Her response was that she wanted me to think of her every time I saw this color. She said that she had seen it work in a movie. She then said, "I am more beautiful than you will ever be." Wherever she went, she had a horde of schmoozers around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually, she had to leave the school, and I thought I had peace. Except she one day suddenly showed up and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. This student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks, and I never paid it any mind because, well, why would I? She was allowed to sit there. But this is when crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real exchange student, and B, she had been putting her phone on the table each mealtime while having it on speaker with Anna, who, on the other end, was silently listening in on my conversations. I remember when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. I didn't believe, and a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to were real, but it was what she said next that terrified me most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you are up to." I heard a voice from above that told me it was my mission in life to keep an eye on you and to make sure you behave. The abuse at school escalated quickly after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom. I was chased around the school, and at the same time, I got no help. It escalated into happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texture room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me, screaming, "What makes you think you can sit here?" He did not go to this school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my door. I managed to call the emergency number. I screamed out that I needed help and where I was. I ran towards my door, but another guy was waiting for me there. So I ran towards the head building, but a third guy was waiting for me there too. They cornered me, and I remember how scared I was. I thought I was going to die. But then, a light of hope, blue and red lights from the road. I was saved. I remember how happy I was to see the police officer. Everything would finally be over. And then, he walked up to the girl who orchestrated all of it, Malin. He greeted her like a friend, and I knew in that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help, and he ignored me. She told him that there was no issue here. He said he was looking forward to seeing her around town, and then he left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember are the back lights of that police car driving away. I woke up the next morning, laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Malin claims they never touched me, and I just passed out when one of the guys grabbed me. I know better. I know the pain I felt and the huge bump on the side of my head. I called the emergency number again, and I asked for an ambulance. At this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the dispatcher what the issue was. But I made a mistake. I told her I'd called the day previous, and that a police officer just left me. She got mad, really mad. She told me that I was slandering her coworker, and to only call if I actually needed help. And then she hung up. I was alone again, with no one, Not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Malin, but the officer had heard about me and they deleted my report. It was during this time that I had enough, and I thought about ending my own life, so I was forcefully put in the mental health ward. The stalking didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed, so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to art school again, she had people she had threatened join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. At home, she would have another guy she had threatened to park outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this time, she would also have stolen things from me, things like shoes, gloves, and that kind of thing. According to the people doing the stealing, this was because she had watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year, lying about being a data collector to get private information out of me. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point been given drugs, and then she would get them to do whatever she wanted by threatening to report them to the police if they didn't. Others she just bribed with money or charmed. I've gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her sake. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone, and she will do to them what she does to me if they don't say yes to her. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside the supermarket. Another girl was also roped into sitting in her car outside my house for a few hours, a few days a week, all because of the fear of this woman. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all this because she won an art prize for 500,000 Swedish krona at one point. That's the reason she thinks she's famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she has been doing this since she was a teenager. And yet, even with that information, no one would listen. When I tell people what she had done to me, people call me the crazy one. I have no history of delusions or making up tales, yet it was so much easier for people to think I am crazy. I've even been forcefully medicated at some point with psychosis medication that baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me, something that has forever barred how much trust I can put into the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this, and she said, "To punish you." I asked her for how long I would need to be punished, and she answered, "For as long as I want." At one point, I even considered killing her. I'm the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and lets them out the window. I've never harmed another human being. I've never been violent. Yet at one point, felt so desperate for freedom that I would take prison rather than being haunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than prison. Then, it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why it stopped. Nothing in her history tells me that she would stop so willingly. So I'm convinced that either she has run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. It is possible that one of those people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I don't know. Even so, I can't feel relief. Not yet. I'm still afraid it will start again, and I have given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. I'm in my 20s, and my partner just asked me what my cousin is like, since they've only met briefly. I told him some fun stories from our childhood, and then tried to find some words to describe her character, and one of the first ones was paranoid. But then I stopped to ask myself why I think of her as paranoid, and I suddenly remembered a childhood memory I had completely forgotten. When I was about 10 and she was about 12, I went to her house for a sleepover. I arrived in the early afternoon and we swapped Goosebumps books and listened to The Three Investigators. We then decided to grab a snack for a movie we wanted to see on TV later. Her mom, my aunt, gave us $10 and sent us on our way to a nearby supermarket before it got dark. The area she lived in was near a big intersection outside of the city, with big chain supermarkets and department stores people only ever got to by car. We bought our candy and crossed the main road to go back to the quiet residential district. She noticed a tall man in a yellow t-shirt following us across the road. Unless he also lived in one of the few houses, a slim chance. He had no reason to be there. She told me how she saw him in the shop and how he had followed us across the street. She panicked a bit and told me to walk faster. I did, even though I thought she was overreacting. After all, we both were always reading spooky stories. I was sure they must have gotten into her head. He also picked up his pace and followed us for several streets before we arrived at her house and rang the doorbell, and then he hurried in the other direction. I was a very naive child, and all I had ever been told about stranger danger was to not get into a car with someone who offers you candy. I was not worried in the slightest. I didn't see why she was freaked out at all. When we got to bed that night, she said something like, "Now he knows where I live. I'm so scared. What if he comes here again tonight?" I said to her, "And do what? Murder us? Why would someone do that? He doesn't even know us." I completely forgot about the whole thing, but I started to think of her as paranoid. She probably thinks of me as naive. So this happened to me in December of 2018. Just a quick disclaimer, I was on medication at the time that makes me very, very spaced out. I can't remember most days when I'm on it. For some background, I'm a young female, short blonde hair, 5'6", petite, but still some curves. It's normal for me to get attention while I'm out since I do dress quite out there. I'm really into fashion and colors, so it is hard to miss me. So this starts off when I had just gotten off the train to go to my bank branch. I had misplaced my credit card and needed to pick one up. If I can remember correctly, I was wearing these bright green thigh-high heels, and I guess a red dress, but that's blurry. I was unfamiliar with the area and didn't know where the bank branch was in the shopping center, so I called up my friend if they were 100% sure they had a bank there. That's when I noticed him. He was bald, wearing casual clothes and on the phone staring at me. I thought nothing of it, and I eventually found the bank. I went inside and got what I needed. Naturally, I tested my card with the ATMs outside, and that's when I saw the same guy waiting outside the bank looking at me again. This wasn't strange to me. I didn't think anything of it. I walked to the other end of the shopping center so I can catch the bus home. I didn't know the bus timetable, and I couldn't look it up as I have a shitty iPhone 6, and the battery is complete garbage. I just thought I'd conserve the battery for music. I didn't notice that the guy was following me until he sat down right next to me at the bus stop, weirdly close. He was not talking on the phone anymore, and he started a conversation with me. I never assumed the worst, so I think he's going to ask me a question about the bus timetable or directions. He introduced himself. I can't remember his name, but very quickly he switched and asked me very oddly specific questions. Questions such as, how old are you? Do you have a boyfriend? How much do you weigh? How tall are you? How many friends do you have? What is your family life like? Are you healthy? Where do you hang out with friends? Where are you headed? I told him where I was headed. I know, stupid. But he told me he was headed in the opposite direction, complete opposite. Between the questions that I answered truthfully, because I couldn't really avoid the questions, he would make comments about my appearance. He said, "I've never seen a prettier girl than you. You don't find too many people who dress so uniquely." I was literally messaging my boyfriend, telling him what was going on, until of course my phone ran out. Eventually he continues the conversation with more questions. He said nothing about himself, despite me asking the same questions. He just ignored everything. My bus rolls up. I stand up, say thanks and goodbye, and he stands up as well and follows me onto the bus. It was going the complete opposite direction of where he was heading. I sat down, silently panicking, but nothing too bad. The medication I was on at the time made me extremely tired and chill, so it wasn't like a panic attack. He sat down in the seat behind me, not talking to me anymore. Eventually about 5 minutes pass, and it's my stop now. It's a popular stop due to the cluster of apartments, but I kept seated until the very last second because something was off. I got off and he wasn't able to follow me. I looked at the bus as it drove past me, and he had this unfriendly look on his face, looking directly at me through the windows. It may not be as creepy as other people's, but I believe I was possibly being interviewed for something nefarious. It's far-fetched, but I really do believe something was insanely off. He wasn't asking normal questions, and he followed me on my bus, despite heading in a different direction. If he was into me, you'd think he'd ask for my number or something. I was visiting my 6-year-old nephew in California and decided to go play at the park. This is not the first time I brought him to the same park. When we arrived, there were a couple of kids with their parents playing at the playground. My nephew then decided to run and climb a tree far away from the playground, so I followed him and helped him sit on a fairly low branch. He was happy. Then I just heard this voice asking if they can ask a question. I didn't know it was directed at me, so I didn't pay it any mind. And then the person started walking towards us with a hand in their pocket. It was a woman in her late 20s to early 30s, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie with a backpack on. She then shouted a series of questions to which I was indifferent, until she said to put your hands where I can see them. Seeing that we were alone at the far side of the park, and that there was no police car nearby to at least confirm that she's an officer, I grabbed my nephew, who didn't want to be carried away, and headed towards the playground where there were people. She followed us aggressively, asking, "Can I just ask you a question? Is he your brother? Hey, why are you holding him like that?" I just answered, "He's my nephew, and we are fine." I was panicking. I'm a short guy, foreign to the States, and my nephew is starting to have a meltdown. Her hand is still in her pocket, and I've seen enough crime movies. So sorry, no, you cannot ask me a question. I have no idea what was going on, but my gut feeling told me to get away ASAP. When she asked me if the person at the bench were my parents, I told her yes, so she'd go away. Finally, we're at the playground and the woman was still there. She shouted at the couple sitting on the bench that I was not responsive to her questions and that they may need to call 911 on me. The couple responded that they'll watch us. I told the couple that the kid is in the spectrum and I'm his uncle, and that woman has been staring at us and was creepy. The wife told me that she understands and she has a neighbor on the spectrum. I don't know if I'm overreacting, but I was very scared after. We played at the swings for a bit more, just to show everyone that he really was my nephew. I then told my nephew it's bath time, so we can walk home. I made sure to lock the doors when we got home, just in case she followed us. I was so creeped out. Was I overreacting, or was what happened harmless? This is not an encounter per se, as I have never actually talked to this man. For a bit of background, I live on an island, and my backyard ends in a golf course. I only live with my mom and 2 dogs. Back in August of 2021, I saw this man. He looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s, walking on the golf course. He had no golf gear, no golf cart, not even in golf clothing. All of a sudden, he walks into my backyard and starts snooping around. It looked like he was trying to get the lay of the land. It kept happening for a while, but then stopped for a bit. Then it happened again for a while, and then stopped until recently. I caught him doing it again. When all this first started happening, I thought he was just a golfer retrieving a ball that was hit into my backyard. I quickly realized that this was not the case. Then I thought he must be a part of the golf course's staff. That was not the case either, because he was not in the uniform that the staff wear. Sometimes he even gets really close to the house, which makes me very nervous. This is a grown man I absolutely do not know, and he's not a golfer. It's really off-putting because I'm a minor only living with my mom. He looks like he's getting the lay of the land, scoping out potential places he could enter the house. When I see him, I always make sure to stare at him, making it known that he is not welcome in my yard for no reason, and certainly not in my house. He occasionally catches my stare and quickly walks away, looking very guilty. A weird older guy catcalled me while I was shopping in town, and when I didn't respond, he started walking. He followed me for an uncomfortably long time, so I made my way to my brother's friend's workplace and explained what happened. He was gone by the time we went back outside to check, but he called my brother to pick me up anyway. I didn't think much of it after that. Fast forward a couple of months and I got a call from someone claiming to be my sister's friend from university. He claimed she had given him a parcel for me and that he needed to meet with me right away at a secluded location because it was close to my house. This is something my sister had done 3 or 4 times previously. He knew my name, my sister's name, her friends, her university, my friends, and my high school. After that chat, I agreed to meet him at a local shop where I was well known. It wasn't far from where he'd suggested, so he agreed. I made my way there, and I froze when I saw him walking towards me. It was him, the guy that followed me around months earlier. He said something along the lines of, "Finding you was the easy bit." I didn't wait to find out what he meant. I went straight into the butcher's and told them what was going on. He was chased away by a knife-wielding butcher, and I never heard from him or saw him again. When my sister finally picked up the phone, she said she had no such friend. It took a lot of convincing for my dad to let me go anywhere after that. I try not to think about what his intentions were. I'm a 21-year-old female, and some of these details are a bit hard to recall, but this whole situation has had a huge effect on me. It was really traumatic. Back in 7th grade, I had a middle school boyfriend, Kevin. We went to a really small religious school, and being new to a school where everyone grew up together, I felt relieved to have someone I could talk to and sit with at lunch every day. Kevin was my first kiss. The relationship was pretty innocent, except for a few instances that made me feel really uncomfortable. We shared a notebook that we would trade off to each other in between classes to leave cute notes and drawings for one another. One day, I had just finished running the mile for my gym class. I handed him the notebook, and when he gave it back to me later in the day, he had written something about how my pheromones had really turned him on. I had no idea what that meant back then, but I still felt somewhat uncomfortable about it. He seemed a bit off, but was really well liked at my school, so I figured it was just me overthinking the situation. As time went on, the relationship ended, like most middle school relationships do. A while after we had broken up, we still talked on the phone occasionally and remained friends. He began calling my home phone constantly, even in the middle of the night, which annoyed my parents. Eventually I stopped answering as often, realizing that he was becoming obsessive. Around that same time, I was laying in bed one night at around 1 to 2 in the morning. I hear a knock on my window. My blinds were closed and my bedroom was on the 2nd floor, so I was very confused about what I was hearing. The knocking continued and I heard someone saying my name. I had no idea who was on my roof knocking at my window. I was freaking out. I ran to my parents' room to wake up my dad, saying, "Dad, someone is on the roof and they're knocking on my window." My dad ran outside to catch the person, but didn't see anyone. I went back to bed thinking I was just making things up in my head, But it happened again after a few minutes. My dad went back outside and didn't see anyone. This cycle continued for another 30 minutes, until eventually my dad had to sleep on the floor of my room with me, just in case. I really thought I was going crazy. A week or so later, the calls from Kevin continued. I answered at one point, and eventually he had told me that he was the person knocking on my window. He said whenever my dad would come outside, he hid behind my chimney. He wanted me to let him into my room and told me he thought it would be romantic, like Romeo and Juliet. I told my parents and stopped answering the phone entirely. I can't remember how far in between these next few instances happened, but it gradually escalated as more time passed. I would avoid him at school, and he didn't make much of an effort to talk to me. At some point, I changed schools to go to a public school instead. During the beginning of the school year, I was asleep in my bed when my mom pounded on my door. She was yelling at me to lock my door because someone had broken into our house. I jumped out of bed to lock my door and hid in my bed under my covers, paralyzed with fear and trembling as I strained to hear what was happening outside my bedroom. I could hear my mom scream for my dad to ask if he was okay, and a few minutes later she grabbed me and my sisters and locked us in my parents' bedroom. Apparently my dad had decided to sleep on the couch that night because our dog was acting strange and annoying him. While he was sleeping, my dog started barking and losing his mind. Up until that night, my dog never acted that way, so my dad got up to investigate. He found Kevin leaving our basement and saw that our basement window had been broken. He yelled for my mom and woke her up as he put Kevin in a headlock. She then called the police. He broke the basement window with a hammer, took his shoes off and left them on the window ledge. Then he jumped down from the window, landing on broken glass. He left bloody footprints all over the carpeted stairs, and he was heading up with the hammer when my dad found him. I still don't know what his intentions were that night, but it terrifies me to think about it. When the cops arrived, they took him out in handcuffs. I spied on them as they told my parents that the look in his eyes was the look of someone who would grow up to kill his parents. His eyes were wide and insane looking. It was one of the most terrifying nights of our lives. We later found out he rode his little sister's bike for several miles in the middle of a storm to get to my house. I was able to get a restraining order against him after that, but he never had to pay to repair the window, and he only had to do community service. After that, my parents decided to get security cameras for the inside and outside of our house, along with motion lights. A while after the break-in occurred, maybe a month or two after, my neighbor called my parents in the early morning to inform them that he had gone outside and smelled spray paint. When he went to see where the smell was coming from, it didn't take him long to realize the entire outside of our house had been vandalized. There was a giant smiley face on our garage door, something along the lines of, "Your daughter is a whore," written on the side of our house, and random lines and doodles all over the doors and windows. There was also spray paint on the security sticker on the basement window that we just recently repaired. Whoever had done it had apparently hidden behind my neighbor's car and also got paint on his car. We checked the security cameras while waiting for the police to arrive. We saw footage of someone that was Kevin's height and build spray painting the windows. What's even more terrifying was when we watched the footage from before that. It showed me walking down the stairs in my underwear and t-shirt to get a late night snack, with who we assumed to be Kevin watching me from the outside window. It had rained that night, so despite having the spray paint cans and security footage, the police weren't too positive that they would be able to get fingerprints from the cans. They said the security footage wasn't clear enough to say it was Kevin for sure. I knew it was him, but he never got caught. My family had to pay thousands to fix the damage he did to our house. The harassment continued for years, despite me having a restraining order against him. And by the time I was in high school, he had made countless fake accounts pretending to be me. He posted very embarrassing things and followed everyone at my new school. I constantly dealt with people asking if the accounts were me, which turned into bullying and even more harassment. I would get messages of him saying, I know where you are. I'm watching you," and threats of him saying he was going to kill me. This went on for another year until he finally stopped. He later ran an anti-bullying campaign and never had to face the consequences of his actions. He put me through hell. I can't even begin to express how terrifying those years of my life were. At the time, it was too much to handle, and I ended up in a mental hospital after a mental breakdown. I wish I could say I've healed from that time of my life all these years later, but I still struggle with the aftermath of the trauma he caused me. I have panic attacks when I get message requests. I keep my blinds shut and doors locked at all times. Any knocking noises on my window causes my heart to jump. I'm so upset he gets to live his life and not deal with the aftermath of what he did to me and my entire family. What's worse is people from my old school loved him and still do despite knowing what he did. One person messaged me years ago and said I was lying, and even if it was true, it was my fault. Seeing the love he still receives despite acting that way fills me with so much anger. I'm just hoping that telling this story helps me to continue to heal. For context, I was around 8 to 9 years old, and my brother played a lot of soccer. I don't like to watch the games because I don't find them entertaining, so to pass the time, I would sit in our car and watch movies and mess around with one of my friends. DJ and I were sitting in the car when I told him I had to use the bathroom and then I'd be right back. DJ was a couple years younger than me, but that didn't bother me much. He was a chill guy and fun to hang out with, and very brave. As I left to head to the bathrooms, I had my earbuds blasting music like a dumbass. I know now to keep one earbud out at all times in public, but yeah, I walked in and I chose to stall for privacy reasons. Nothing was out of the normal until someone banged on the stall door. It scared the shit out of me and I thought it was DJ at first, but I wish it was. It was an old, tired, round-looking man who I thought was peeking through the stall. I still don't know if he was or not, but I hurried the hell up so I could get out of there. Before I was finished, I heard him say something along the lines of, "These damn kids are so easy to," and that's all I heard before my sister opened the door and then said, "Buddy, come on, Mom needs you fast." I hurried up and washed my hands, but that man was just staring at me. He didn't do anything, he just stared at me. I was frankly freaked the fuck out and got out of there, but as I was walking out, my sister grabbed my hand and said, "Come on." We sped walked away real fast. I asked her what's up. She said that the man who was in the bathroom with me had pretty much been stalking me as soon as I left the car. My sister said she ran like hell over to the bathrooms, and luckily nothing happened yet. I went pale as a ghost and was freaked out, but I told her I'd stay in the car. My sister nodded and I went back to the car with DJ. He asked me, "Did you fall in, bro? Jeez." And then he looked at me and knew something was off. I told him the whole story and he was just as freaked out as I was, but then he said, "Let's grab rocks." This kid was ready to bash someone's head in. The parking lot was made out of a bunch of rocks and concrete, but occasionally you would find a big sharp rock. We opened the door and both found medium-sized sharp rocks, just in case that man came back. Thankfully, he didn't. I'm so thankful and glad my mom and sister noticed that man follow me, and that my sister checked on me. I don't know what his intentions were, but I had a feeling they were not good. So, to whoever that man was in the bathroom stalking me, I hope we never meet again. When I was 16, I used to attend English classes that were designed for people of all ages, so I was used to having colleagues older than me that also wanted to improve their language skills. I was the usual nice girl. I always felt like I had to be polite and friendly to everyone, even if I got a bad vibe from the person. but I was only really close to another girl my age back then, Jasmine. She was much more popular than me, so she would always introduce me to new people. One day, I noticed this new guy in her group. He was 32 and very talkative, always smiling. For some reason, though, he made me feel uncomfortable from the get-go. I think it's because he would stare at me for no apparent reason. While everyone was talking as a group, he seemed to address me specifically every time, but I didn't give it much thought. As the days passed, he started waiting around my classroom door and start conversations about my friendship with Jasmine, my high school, my family. I thought it was weird that he was so interested, given that he was much older, but I felt guilty for feeling that way. He was just being nice, and I was being mean to think that he was weird. I should have listened to my instinct. Instead, I forced myself to answer, to make small talk. He told me how close he was with Jasmine, and that made me feel a bit safer. When I asked her about him, though, she said she didn't know him that well, but she said he seemed nice enough. One day, I got a call from a strange number. When I picked it up, it was him. He said he got my number from Jasmine. I was upset and confronted her about giving my number to him. She told me he insisted, so she ended up agreeing to it. He started calling me all the time, 2 to 3 times a day. He would ask me about my day, say how he missed me and wanted to chat. He started telling me private stuff about his life because he felt like he could talk to me since I was so mature for my age. I didn't like it, so I stopped answering, or I would make an excuse and quickly hang up. Then he would send me messages, and that's when things started getting worse. The messages would vary in tone. Sometimes they were really childish, with lots of emojis. He would wish me a lovely day, or say he was thinking of me. Other times, they would simply say, "You're so pretty, too pretty," with no context. He would say he was glad I didn't have a boyfriend, that I should never get one or he would be mad. I never answered those and showed them to Jasmine. I told her I didn't want to see or talk to him anymore before or after class. She said she would help. I started going to class late so I wouldn't meet him in the corridors. I would leave class immediately after the end, but I saw him watching me. I could feel he knew what I was doing, but actually sort of enjoyed it. I felt like it was a game to him, making me feel uncomfortable. He stopped talking to Jasmine and everyone else, but continued to message me saying, "I miss you," or "Why are you so busy?" I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it and started relaxing a bit. But one day, as I was walking with another girl outside the school, he showed up with a big smile and said that it's been too long. Why wasn't I answering his messages? He acted like he was worried about me, that I was studying too much and that kind of thing. He invited me to go have a coffee with him in his house. I told him no and went inside the library, where I pretended to study until he left. He waited around doing nothing for over an hour. I started to get incredibly scared by then. Since that day he invited me to his house, he became more aggressive, making fun of me whenever we bumped into each other in the corridor, saying stuff like, "Still busy," or "I'm in no hurry." He found my social media and sent messages there, each time more explicit. He would comment on my pictures saying I was sexy and that he knew what I was up to, teasing him. I blocked him on everything, but I always felt like he was watching me all the time. He stopped talking to me, but would always stare at me in class. One day, I was heading back home alone after class. I noticed a car was right next to me. It was driving really slowly, and when I looked, it was him. He talked to me through the window and invited me in. He said he would give me a ride home. I was on a residential street, so there weren't many people around. I said no and continued on my way. He kept insisting and saying he knew where I lived and could drop me off there. I stopped interacting with him and started walking faster. I just wanted to get to the main road so there would be people around. He got angry and then said, "Get in a voice I almost didn't recognize. I looked at him then, in shock. and his facial expression had changed completely. He had a dark look in his eyes, no smile at all. He looked like he wanted to hurt me. So I ran. I went into the first shop I saw. I waited until his car left, and then I sped home. After that, I did not want to go back to class. I asked my mom to change my class for me. I never told her why. For some reason, I felt ashamed, like I somehow caused this situation. I finished the semester without incidents, and I thought it was all over. But after 2 years, he came back. By then, I was starting uni. Any thoughts of him were out of my mind, until he created a new account on Facebook and started messaging me again, like nothing happened. He said he was hurt I cut him out of my life, that he wanted to be my friend. I blocked every account he made without ever answering. One day, to my panic, he showed up on my campus. I went to a university closest to home, but still, it couldn't have been a coincidence. He was just across the street, watching me. I hurried and got onto a bus before he could talk to me. The next week, I wasn't so lucky. I was eating a snack at the cafeteria with a group of friends, and he just suddenly came by and introduced himself to everyone. He was acting like we were old friends. I could barely breathe. My friends noticed I wasn't feeling well, and he seemed to enjoy their confusion and my fear. I pulled him aside and asked him what he was doing. I asked him to leave me alone. He said he wouldn't, and again, that dark look he had in the car years before showed itself once more. The creepiest thing about it was just how different it was from the expression he had around anyone else. He looked like a different person. I told him I would tell everyone, and then he said he knew I wanted him. He knew I was just a dirty little tease, but that he would get me. My body and mind just shut down when I heard that. I ran back to my friends and started crying. When I finished telling them everything, he had gone away, and I never saw him again. I still think about him. I'm 28 years old now, so I don't think he will contact me again. But somehow, I still feel he's not that far away. I don't have Facebook anymore, and never put photos of myself on Instagram because I am scared he will see them. I'm a 20-year-old female, and this happened to me 3 weeks ago. The whole thing lasted for about a week. So I'm a part-time Goodwill cashier, and I was sent to put away clothes in the back. One thing that you have to understand about Goodwill is that they will take in people who haven't had the best past and try to bring them in and give them a better life. So I'm in the back putting clothes away, and my manager brings out one of the variables to help me. Now mind you, I wasn't really paying attention when he started putting clothes away. This guy sees me and says, "Man, this job sucks, don't it?" And I respond by saying, "Well, it does have its negatives," and at that point I'm just agreeing to his small talk. We finish up and I take my break. When I'm finished, I then go out to the floor, and there he is sitting on one of the couches, waiting for me to help him sweep the floor. By then, I was like, "Okay man, but you leave in like 10 minutes. He just said it'll be what keeps me busy until then." So while I was sweeping, he just kept following me and asking me about what college I go to, and other personal questions. Don't get me wrong, I like talking to people and keeping the conversation, but this guy was asking me questions that he doesn't really need to know. I tried my best to steer the subject away from my personal life. It worked. But then he started asking me, "How old do you think I am?" I was just really tired at that point, and I guessed maybe late 20s. He then said to me, "Oh, don't make me blush," in a babyish tone. Now this creeped me out more than I already was. He answered that he was 36 and later said that we should hang out and go to a Taco Bell together. In my head I was thinking, dude, you were supposed to leave like 10 minutes ago. He kept asking me what time I got off, and I said when we close. Thinking back, I wasn't really worried why he was asking me, but it still was odd. So he finally leaves because I tell him that I needed to catch my last break. 3 days later, he comes back to the store, but he isn't a variable. He's in his regular clothes instead of his blue vest, so he was just a customer. Once again, I'm putting clothes away, and he sees me and says, "You look tired, hon. When you take your break, let's head to Taco Bell together." I said I couldn't in the busiest way possible, but after, he just kept following me around the store and making small talk. I then lose him and do my thing throughout the day. While I'm doing that, I notice him leave the store and come back 3 times. He then sits on the couch and keeps looking at me. By then, I just flat out ignore him and go to lunch. When I come back, he's gone, and I steer my attention to other things. Finally, when the store is about to close, one of the assistant managers brings me back to the office and tells me to be careful around the variable who keeps following me. She kept saying that he tried to get with one of the other female workers in the back. The most important thing that she noticed was that he had been in the men's restroom for about 2 hours doing God knows what. I knew he did weed, but it's stupid to do that at goodwill. She basically kicked him out and he finally went to his car. The day before that, he never came to the store and was only in his car until the store closed. She then noticed that the car belonged to him. I only hope that he gets switched out to another job because I do not want to see him again. This happened a while ago. I lived in Staten Island for a few years because I went to college there. I was about 20 years old at the time. One evening, I went to the Need for Speed screening in Manhattan. Unfortunately, I was alone because my friend bailed on me last minute. I love Aaron Paul and Kid Cudi. I had to go even if it was by myself. As some of you may know, Staten Island is a part of New York City, but still very far from everything. After this awesome event, I headed back to my dormitory in Staten Island, which resulted to be the longest and scariest trip of my life. When I transferred to 2-to-1 train at Chambers Street, and while waiting for one train, this weird guy approached me, asking for my name. I think his name was Chris. I lied to him and told him my name was Sophia. I just kept walking away from him. He then offered me candy, which I declined. This was around 9:30 at night or so, and welcome to New York City. The train was taking forever to come, which freaked me out even more. He would ask me questions like, where am I from? What school I go to? I lied at every single thing. He told me he lives in Brooklyn, blah blah blah. I noticed another woman by us who kept turning around to see my situation. I decided to sit next to her and whispered to her and asked her to pretend she knew me. She told me how she was going to approach me anyways, because she knew I could be in a dangerous situation. So the train comes and I decided to miss it. However, this guy Chris tapped on my shoulder and said, "Sophia, the train is here." At this moment, I got goosebumps. I was sweating so much. I told him, "Thank you, but this is my friend and we're going to talk." I thanked the woman who helped me and hopped on the next train. When I got to the ferry station, I did not feel comfortable or safe, so I, for some reason, went up to this sweet-looking couple and explained my situation, and they kindly offered that I can sit next to them on the ferry. Fortunately, they were traveling on the same bus after the ferry too. You'd think the story ends here. Remember how this guy Chris said that he lives in Brooklyn? As soon as I sit with this couple, I see the guy walking back and forth by us. I informed the couple that this is the guy who was creeping on me. I almost started crying. The couple comforted me and the guy told me how he knows martial arts, and that helped me calm down a bit. However, this Chris guy would not stop walking by us the whole time the ferry was moving, and that lasted about 20 to 25 minutes. The creepiest part of this situation is that when I thought I lost him getting off the ferry, Chris walks right by me, and he says to me, "I hope to see you again, Sophia." I wanted to disappear from the earth at that moment, and the couple told him off and threatened to call the police on him if he did not stay away from me. Thankfully, the couple and I got on the bus together. They gave me their numbers to let them know I was back in my dormitory safely. since their stop was before mine. When I got to campus, I asked the security guard to drive me back to my dorm so I was home safely. Chris from Brooklyn, you gave me one of the biggest anxieties in the world. Asshole. A former friend of mine runs a search and rescue operation where we live. So a few years ago, I'd sometimes help with training by hiding in the woods or some hard-to-reach place, so one of the dogs could practice searching for live victims. He also had a dog that worked to find human remains, a dog just for rubble and dangerous ground, and he even had a bedbug dog. It was really fun and quite amazing to watch them work actually. I would also dog sit and just spend a lot of time with the dogs in general. So one afternoon, my friend, the human remains dog, and I were just out for a walk in a pretty populated park, off duty, when a man approached us to pet the dog. It's not uncommon. It actually happened a lot, especially if we were wearing our search and rescue shirts. The man started speaking to my friend when suddenly the dog gave her alert and indicated on the man's feet, directly on his shoes. There was no question, it was her signal. The man, of course, didn't know that was how she indicated, so he didn't notice at all, as it is a subtle signal, if you aren't looking for it. My friend and I looked at each other with a quick flash of unexpected horror. We cut the conversation off as fast as we could and left. To this day, I wonder, what the hell? I should add that the dog would only pick up on the scent of human remains. She was trained to ignore the scent of animal remains. It was my friend's gig, and I was in it for the free dog love, so I don't know the ins and outs of how it all worked, but I do know her signal, and she gave it, loud and clear. My friend had no explanation either, and she was a very reliable canine. We don't think it was her mistake. We took her back to the same spot to confirm that it wasn't just the ground she was alerting on. She didn't alert in the area again. I'm a dog walker for a small company. I have one client in a somewhat nicer neighborhood that I go to twice a week in the mornings. Like most people who use dog walkers, they use a lockbox. They decided to keep theirs behind a vase next to their apartment door. It was already a busy Monday for me, and I was in a bit of a rush. I was hoping to get their puppy Mia by 9:45 so I could stay on track for the day. After finding parking, which is usually hell, I made my way up to their apartment door. I wrapped my hand around the vase, intending to grab the lockbox. Nothing. I was not alarmed at first. Sometimes owners forget to put out lockboxes. It's not really common, but it does happen. I look around a bit and have no luck, so I messaged the owner, Kay. Usually when I do text her, I get no response since she's so busy, but I message her anyway, asking her where the lockbox could possibly be. About 5 minutes pass without a response. I'm getting a bit irritated. I already have a busy day driving around the city, and now I'm gonna run behind schedule, so I start knocking. There is a chance her husband would be home. Sometimes he is. I knock about 3 separate times until I hear some shuffling upstairs. So someone is home. It takes a bit of time, but I hear someone making their way down the stairs. After a bit of time, the door opens. It's not Kay, nor is it her husband. A man stands in front of me. He's only wearing a white towel that's barely hanging off of his hips. He's holding Mia in his arms and looks extremely caught off guard. I'm confused and also caught off guard, but I'm not quite horrified. Maybe they were having a visitor stay with them, or maybe someone was having an affair. That might be why the lockbox was absent. "Hey, I'm here to take Mia for her walk," I said. He lets her run out into the hallway and hands the leash and collar over. They're always on the staircase railing. I ask him to please give me the lockbox to keep outside since I need it to get back inside. He gives it to me. We head out for our walk. I'm a bit flabbergasted. Did I just walk in on an affair? Was he a visitor? It wasn't too out of the ordinary. Sometimes clients forget to mention they have guests. Then during our walk, I get a message from my manager. It said, "Do you have Mia?" And then she calls. I pick up and I let her know I have Mia and we're out on our walk. She says she got a weird message from Kay, her owner. She had stated a man came by earlier saying he was the new dog walker and that he needed their lockbox code. I guess her husband gave him the code. We never set up a new walker, ever. I then let her know about the man in the towel when I got to the apartment and how the lockbox was gone. I told her I wasn't sure if I had walked in on something or if he was a guest. Well, he was not a secret lover or guest. He was not supposed to be there. Police were called immediately. I was told to absolutely not go back into the home. I called Kay's husband as he was on his way back over. Kay was en route from work. Kay's husband tells me he feels so stupid for telling the man the code and believing him, but he said he was in a rush to leave and didn't assume anything bad. I continue walking down the street, and then I spot a familiar man across the road. He runs across the street towards me. He's also holding a beer in his hand. "Hi, doggy," he says. It was the same man from inside the apartment. He ran back across the street. I immediately turned the other direction into one of the side streets, and then I gave Kay's husband a call. He was nearing the neighborhood and tells me that he just saw the man matching the description. Once Kay and her husband arrived, we went upstairs to scope out the apartment. We expected some items to be missing. Nothing. Everything was in its place untouched. The only thing different was some dirty water in the shower that had been used. I was happy no one was hurt, nor was Mia. I was also happy I wasn't hurt. But how did he know they had a dog walker? For context, I have a 70-pound pit bull who is a highly reactive dog. She wears a muzzle out on walks to keep everyone safe. I really hate the stigma around the breed and the muzzle, but today it came in handy. So thanks to the wet, chilly fall weather keeping my dog inside, we decided to try a new walking route in a quiet, nice enough neighborhood. We were enjoying our winding walk with no destination in mind, and I realized a man with no dog, who wasn't appropriately dressed for a long walk, had been behind us for a long while. After a few left turns, he was still there, so I stopped and made my dog sit. We faced him and waited for him to catch up. He came up to me and started saying I'm pretty and can he have my number. I accused him of following me and he got defensive and aggressive, stepping toward me and calling me a slut. I firmly said, "My dog will bite, back up." He muttered something about, "I can take that mutt." So I popped off her muzzle and she pulled towards him. He took right off. I'm very grateful for my dog today and every day. This happened to me a while ago. Honestly, it was one of the freakiest encounters of my life. This is true despite how much it sounds like a no-sleep kind of story. I was scared out of my fucking mind, and I will remember this encounter until the day I die. I took my dog to this fenced dog park. I try to go at 5 or 6 because that's when most people get off work and bring their dogs there, so there'd be a large amount of dogs for my puppy to socialize with. It rained earlier in the day, but stopped, so I was surprised to see only one person in the dog park. I knew both him and his dog, and we chatted for a bit while our dogs chased each other around. It's also worth mentioning the atmosphere was just so creepy. A low, thick fog covered the entire dog park. It was that horrible weather that's somehow both humid and cold. Just a dreary, rainy fall day. It wasn't that dark yet. So when the guy and his dog left, I decided to stay for a while and play fetch with my dog. Mistake number 1. I throw the ball around for a bit, and on one throw, something caught my eye. There was a man in all black, hood up, standing at the fence, completely still, facing towards me. I couldn't see his face, so I don't know if he was looking at me. I try to brush it off as Maybe he's just watching us play fetch. I do have a 5-month-old puppy after all, who is adorable and draws lots of attention from strangers. I threw the ball in his direction a few more times so that I could glance at him to see if he would move on. No, he never did. At that point, I started to get pretty freaked out. I didn't want to stay alone in a dog park with only one entrance. It was significantly darker at this point as well. I really wanted to get out of there, but in order to leave, I'd have to walk past this man. So I gather my stuff and begin to leave. I walk to the entrance, glancing at him every few seconds. He's still standing there, completely still, but now he's turned more towards me. I took out my phone and pretended to be talking to someone, saying things like, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. 15? What? That's too soon. Okay, Dad, I'll try." The moment I left the dog park, he turned and started walking away, heading straight towards the parking lot. I was relieved, but only for a moment. He wasn't walking, he was shuffling, and only a few feet at the time, and then he would stop completely, turn around and look at me, and then keep going. He repeated this 3 or 4 times, and then after that his walk changed. He started throwing his head back and looking up at the sky repeatedly, rhythmically, and then he'd take huge strides forward. His movements were very bizarre. It was like an exaggerated tiptoe-like walk. And still, every 10 or so feet, he would look back at me. I was walking behind him slowly in the same direction towards my car. Needless to say, I was pretty much convinced I was going to be stabbed, robbed, kidnapped, or whatever. I was scared to death. My whole body was tense and cold. I've never felt that kind of fear in my entire life. It was a deep, horrible, in the pit of your stomach, I could die tonight fear. Then, suddenly, he turns sharp and runs into the trees alongside the path. I took this opportunity to pick up the pace. I passed the spot where he'd run into the trees, mistake number 2. Barely seconds after I passed him, I hear a rustling. He's coming out of the trees, behind me, fast. He was no longer walking like he was. Instead, it was a fast, curt power walk straight at me. This is where I noped the fuck out of there and started sprinting. I was about 30 yards from my car. I scooped up my dog and jumped into the driver's seat. I started my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. As I was backing up out of my parking space, the light shined for just a second on the man. He was standing at the beginning of the parking lot, completely still and just staring. I may or may not have called my mom and cried the entire way home. I was so shaken up. I didn't want to walk around at night for a few days. Even writing this has made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I've told people that I frequently see there about this encounter, and now I make sure that I am never the last person in the dog park. The summer that I turned 7, I had a best friend, M, who lived in the middle of nowhere on a big plot of land. Her mother grew up in Germany, but moved to the US in her 20s. She bred German Shepherds. I spent a lot of time at their house as a child. Occasionally, M's mom would leave us alone at the house while she ran errands, with their 3 adult dogs running around outside, guarding the fenced-in yard. We would usually just watch TV or play with Barbies until she got back. One day we were outside playing in the yard when a car drove very slowly past us. It sped up after passing the house. A little while later, M's mom had to go into town to return some library books or something. She was taking M's little sister, but leaving us at home. I'm not sure how long we were alone before the phone rang, but I answered it. Even though it wasn't my house. It was because M was painfully shy as a child and refused to talk to anyone but close friends and relatives on the phone. An unfamiliar man answered and said, "Hello, I'm the electrician your mom hired. I have to come inside. can you call your dogs off? Chain them up." I panicked a bit because something about this man made me uneasy, and Em's mom hadn't said anything to us about someone coming to work on the house. Plus, this was before the days of cell phones. How did he know about the dogs? I guess he could have had a car phone, but there were no vehicles parked outside the gate, and the dogs weren't even barking. When Em's mom returned, she confirmed that she had not hired anyone to come out to the property. None of us have any idea who he was or how he got the phone number, but he never called back. When I was 11, my family moved to a very rural area of Minnesota in 1999, after living in a city in Wisconsin. We were surrounded by cornfields, and it was about 45 minutes to any larger town or city. I just wanted to set the scene a bit, because as a young kid who was used to the city, it definitely added to the creepy factor at night. What made it even worse at night for me was that a lot of times I was left alone. My mom was a night shift nurse, and my dad was a truck driver. I would leave the TV on playing Nick at Night, so I could fool myself into thinking my mom was in the living room watching TV shows. I would also sleep in their room because it brought me comfort and was closer to the TV. Some may disapprove of this, but at the time there wasn't much to do about it. My parents needed to make money, and this is what they chose to do. Anyway, it was like this often. But one weekend my dad was home, which didn't happen too often. This meant I was in my room, which was right near the front door, and my dad was in his bedroom toward the back of the house. We had a Springer Spaniel who was my best friend and who slept with me often. One night that weekend, I woke up to him not at my side. I could hear what sounded like a dog, my dog, growling and whimpering. I got up, walked to the kitchen right outside my room, and looked toward the front door. In the entryway, I saw the head of a man bent down near my dog. I said, "Hello?" I'm not sure what the hell I was thinking as a young girl. I should have ran to get my dad, but I was worried about my dog, I guess. He stood up, looking startled. I don't remember what he looked like very well, but he was probably in his 40s or 50s, short, and looked a bit disheveled. He asked me where a nearby town was, and I told him I didn't know, but I could go get my dad. The man had taken a few steps forward, and my dog growled. He then said he would figure it out and walked out the door. I ran to get my dad, and needless to say, my dad was really upset I didn't come get him right away. The man never came back that I know of. I don't know if he knew I was usually home alone somehow and tried to come in, or if maybe he was drunk and entered the wrong house thinking it was his. It was definitely pure luck that this strange guy tried to get into my house on a weekend my dad was home. I know for sure that my dog may have saved me from something awful happening. I still wonder what he was bent down trying to do to my dog to make him whimper like that. I also wonder what would have happened had I not heard my dog. Anyway, that's my story. It was definitely creepy for me. So for some context, I live in Italy, and usually cities' historical centers have mainly pedestrian zones and few parking spots for residents. Last week while my sister was walking the dog saw a cat and ran away before my sister got her. My family loves that dog, so of course we all went searching for her. I was in pajamas with my phone running low on battery, so without flashlights and just a few streetlights illuminated, it was quite dark. I was shouting my dog's name while looking for her, when a 40 to 50-year-old man, which I didn't see until that point, said that he just saw a dog running a few blocks from where we were. I followed him in silence until we were near a parking spot. He got really close to me and tried to put his hands around my back. At that point, I realized what was going on. I pushed him and sprinted as fast as I could. I knew the place really well and hid where I knew he couldn't find me. I messaged my mom. A few minutes later, both my mom and sister arrived together. We decided to call it a day and went home. And guess what? Our dog was waiting for us at the front door. I don't know what that guy's intentions were, but I'm glad I reacted quickly and got away. This happened a long time ago, but it comes up every once in a while at family gatherings. So for some context, I have a very close extended family, as in a huge family that all lives within 30 minutes of each other. We all live in the suburbs of a large city, far enough away that it's generally considered a safe area, with all the neighbors knowing each other. Car doors are even left unlocked in the driveway. When I was young, my grandma used to watch my cousins and I. She had 2 dogs. There was Benji, a sweet, lovable dog. And then there was Cheyenne. She was nice enough, but we always preferred Benji, as he was nicer, more playful, and just generally wanted to be around us more. We'd always play in the backyard with each other, sometimes with supervision and sometimes not. It was a fenced-in yard, and like I said, it was a nice enough area. Nothing strange at all. Anyway, one day we're playing outside as per usual. Benji's inside with Grandma. Cheyenne was outside, but just laying away from us as we played with our cars or whatever we were messing with that day. We didn't notice until he started talking, but once he spoke, we noticed an older man, maybe 50-something, trying to talk to us through the fence. He was no more than 20 feet away. He seemed nice enough, but hey, I was young, so I had no clue. We kind of walk over to him, but not very close. We were about 6 feet from the fence. He's talking to us about God knows what. This whole time Cheyenne had started coming over to us and began growling lowly. We didn't think much of it and kept talking. I cannot remember what the subject of conversation was. All I know is at one point, he began trying to call us over to him. To which we wouldn't. We knew that much at least. He was getting upset, and at this point he started to climb the fence. I have never been so afraid of a dog in my life. Cheyenne starts going absolutely berserk, as in if he had gotten over the fence, I don't think Cheyenne would have let him leave the yard alive. He jumps back. My grandma hears this happening, so she rushes out to the yard and sees the guy, us, and the dog going insane. She starts screaming like I've never heard her scream before as he runs away and down the road. We ended up being rushed inside where my grandma sat us down very nicely and explained the stranger danger thing again. My grandma had no idea who it was. The whole time the rest of the day, Cheyenne would not leave our sides. I was always a little scared of Cheyenne after that. I know now it wasn't fair to her. She was just protecting us. After that, I learned I will always trust my dogs. We've had dogs as long as I can remember. I will trust any of them over any person every time. I have no idea what he was planning on doing if he got into the yard, and Cheyenne hadn't been there. I'm sorry of being cold of you, Cheyenne. Please, rest in peace. I live in a rather old apartment complex that was built when the suburb I live in was more rural. Because of this, the complex property is rather large with a lot of green space in between each building, and all the buildings in the complex are arranged to be facing a large open courtyard type area. There are quite a few lights on the front of each building, but not many on the sides, so the green spaces between each building are fairly dark at night. I took my dog out rather late one evening to give him one last opportunity to go to the bathroom before bed. Because it was so late, I just decided to hang around the green space next to my building, instead of taking my dog for a proper walk around the courtyard like I usually do. As I'm standing there while my dog heavily sniffs a patch of grass, I notice a guy dressed in all black walking on the opposite side of the courtyard. He sees me looking in his direction, and then he turns into one of the green spaces next to a building on the opposite side. I can faintly see the outline of him. I'm getting a little creeped out because he looks to just be standing there in the darkness. After a few moments, I notice him light up a cigarette. I try and chill out, telling myself he likely just needed a smoke and is hiding out there to avoid being seen, seeing as my complex has a no smoking policy. I go back to walking my dog around the green space next to my building, trying to coax him into doing his business. Eventually he finds a suitable spot and assumes position. I look away from him and notice the smoker has put the cigarette out. He is now walking in a straight line across the courtyard, directly toward me. He was staring directly at me. I'm panicking now, kicking myself for not bringing anything to protect myself, and for stupidly thinking, who's gonna mess with a woman walking an 80-pound dog? The 80-pound dog who is currently now crouching, who I am not confident would stop to protect me. Suddenly the smoker guy takes a hard right and walks into the green space on the other side of the building, to the right of my building. My dog finishes up what he's doing, and I initially go to get a bag to pick it up, but as I'm pretty freaked out and I don't know where the guy is, I say to myself, fuck it, and I run back to my apartment and lock the door. I go over to a window that faces the area I was just in, and I peek out in time to see the smoker guy coming out of the darkness, right behind where I was standing. He had gone through the green space and behind the neighboring building so that he could come up behind where I was standing. I stood motionless next to the window, watching him as he stood there for a second, and then began looking around by the front of the buildings. I assumed trying to see if I was still outside. Eventually he started walking back to the courtyard. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I haven't seen him since then, but I am worried he lives in one of the buildings in my complex. I don't take my dog out that late anymore, and have started carrying pepper spray with me on our walks. Hopefully, I'll never need to use it. I am a 31-year-old disabled woman. I wear leg support, so I can struggle with walking. I was bringing my bull mastiff back from the vets. I was walking down the road from my vets, struggling as my small dog can be a bit excitable. He's 42 kilograms and can take me for a walk at times. My mom had actually walked in with us, but due to her sciatica, she trailed behind. I had a bit of a struggle with my dog's head wedged in the bush. When I heard my mom say, "Excuse me," she called for me to wait and she walked right next to me until we got further down the road. I turned back and saw a guy in a hoodie dip down a road, and then he gave a quick look back. It turns out that the guy had walked right past my mom on the street, sped up to get right behind me, and as I was focused on my dog, I hadn't noticed he was right behind me. My mom had walked as quickly as she could and made noise so that the guy was aware that she was with me. He then dodged after realizing. I felt sick. The fact I hadn't even been aware. The fact I couldn't have defended myself or my dog, and it was broad daylight. The worst part is it happened around a 10-minute walk from my home. I haven't taken my dog out since, and I can't get this out of my head. Luckily, my mom is a legend. The summer of 1997, I was 9 and scared of my own shadow. This experience only furthered my fear of the world. My mom and I drove up from Revere, Massachusetts, to Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire to camp. My dad was going to drive up there the next morning to meet us because he had work. So everything was going normal at the campsite. We set up the tent and built our fire. All was well. It was still daylight when we noticed that the lone, greasy-haired man in the campsite connected to ours was continually running and leaping onto a wooden post, then attempting to balance himself on one foot. He kept doing this over and over and over. It was odd, but we just figured he was some lonely kook. We had a good laugh at his expense. My mom thought maybe he was trying out for the circus. So cut to the nightmare. Absolute darkness if not for the campfire. My mom and I were sitting, roasting s'mores over the flames, when we heard footsteps approaching from the other campsite. Out of the pines, the lone man stumbled onto our campsite. He was ghastly and ragged in the firelight. I could tell my mom was tense. She asked the stranger what he needed. "Hey," he mumbled, "I need your help in my campsite." We waited and he didn't go on. My mom asked what he needed help with. The filthy man said, "I locked my keys in my van. I need you to come over and help me." He then looked at me and said, "Don't worry, kid. You can stay here with your fire." I remember getting goosebumps at that. My mom said to him, "I don't know how I can help you with your keys. You must have a spare hanger lying around somewhere," suggested the man. My mom told him she didn't. The ghoulish man wouldn't let up though. "Yeah, you must have a hanger lying around here somewhere. Maybe you dropped one on the ground near your tent." My mom adamantly told him she didn't have a hanger and quickly added, "My husband will be here soon. Maybe he can help you. He's a pretty strong guy." "Yeah, all right," the guy slurred, and he started to trudge away into the dark, but he turned his head and said, "Well, if you do find a hanger, come help me. I'll be here." And with that, the horrible man left. My mom and I barely slept that night. I felt her moving at every sound outside the tent. Looking back, my poor mother must have stayed up through the long night, worrying a butcher knife was going to slash through the tent wall. And so, morning eventually came. When we stepped out of the tent, we immediately saw that the lone man and his camper were gone. Later in the day, I heard my mom exclaim. I ran over to her and watched as she picked something up from the ground beside our tent. She held it between us, staring at it, not speaking a word. In her hand was a metal hanger. My dad and I went hiking a few days ago. My dad is a waterfall fanatic and he wants to see as many as possible. So he and I are hiking along a pretty trail. We're hiking along a river. It's flowing nicely. There's mountains all around us. The trail is weaving around big, beautiful boulders. I'm hiking at most 30 feet ahead of him, looking for a spot to stop and have a sit-down picnic lunch. And as I rounded a blind curve in the trail, sitting on a stump maybe 10 feet off the right side of the trail is a guy. He's wearing one of those colorful Baja hoodies with the hood pulled up and a half mask with rabbit ears. He sees me and stands up right as my dad rounds the corner. We are all sizing each other up in silence, and my dad addresses him. "What's up, buddy?" The masked man tips his head as if he was deciding what to do with us, and then he says back, "Not much. You aren't the guys I'm waiting for. Have a good day." Then he turns and jogs off quickly into the woods. Strapped on his lower back was a large hunting knife, and he had a pistol on his hip. We lost sight of him pretty quickly. We hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day, and we'd been hiking for almost 3 hours. Needless to say, we left the waterfall for another day and quickly turned around. Once we were off the trail, we reported it to the local forest service and the police, but they said they couldn't do much aside from keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. The masked man didn't have a backpack or water or anything, which makes me think he had either stashed it somewhere or was maybe camping and waiting nearby. I hate to admit it, but I desperately wanted to go after the guy and ask who he was waiting for and why. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 16, and I was attending my last summer at my sleepaway camp in West Virginia. Granted, I was only there for a month, but it was the longest month of my life. My cabin was full of girls I knew from the previous summers, and a girl no one knew, Mary. She was kind of the oddball out, and it was obvious after a few days that she isolated herself. She had a hard time fitting in. I tried my best to include her in our normal activities, while the rest of my friends didn't pay her much attention. After about a week, she started clinging to me, I figured it was because she liked me as a new friend, and I was the only one to show her any attention. Wherever I went, she was kind of just right there, always a step behind me in my periphery. We were required to take buddies to the bathroom, and whenever I casually mentioned I was going, she would jump up and volunteer to take me. Nothing weird. I started noticing strange habits of hers. Whenever we walked to an activity, she would walk next to me, and if she noticed our walking was out of sync, she would skip just to adjust it so we were walking the same way. Now this sounds a little questionable. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, until several of my friends mentioned they were noticing this stuff happening as well. I didn't have to say anything about it. During meals, we were assigned tables, but even though she sat across the entire dining hall away from me, she never stopped watching. I would go up to the buffet and fill my plate. Noticing that I sat down, she would go up and choose the exact same foods as me while still watching. This happened with every activity, from arts to sports and everything in between. At this point, I wasn't creeped out yet. I was just weirded out by her tendencies. On a Tuesday, I was just starting to ride the horse I was newly assigned during the ring lesson. This horse was a little wild from the winter off and bucked me off, causing me to be forced to stay in the infirmary during the lesson times for the rest of the week. The following week, I watched as Mary went out of her way to request the same horse that I had fallen off of. I was kind of perplexed by this. Of course, the Tuesday of that week, I watched as she threw herself off that horse and was forced to stay in the infirmary alone with me. My 1 hour a day that I could escape her was now taken away. I started to get really annoyed by her because no matter what I was doing, she was always there. We had to switch bunks midway through the session, and I was genuinely angry when she requested not only the same cabin as me, but also the bed next to mine. We both chose top bunks that were aligned on the same wall. I started to notice even weirder things. I was writing a letter home one day and felt like I was being watched. I looked to my right and saw Mary was sitting facing forward, but her head was cocked to the side, staring at me with a demonic smile. My stomach dropped. A couple nights after that encounter, I woke up with the same feeling of being watched. It was pitch black, but I grabbed a flashlight to go walk to the bathroom since I was already up. But no, I turned over with my light to see Mary standing next to my bed, with her head at my level, watching me as I slept. She was just standing in the middle of the cabin staring. I was speechless. I figured maybe she needed someone to take her to the bathroom. I start to leave for the bathroom and she follows. I was thoroughly creeped. Stuff like that kept happening for the rest of the session, but when her parents finally came to get her, I refused to even look up to say bye. I've never been so happy to leave a place in my life. I cannot express the level of creepiness over the computer, but I can say I literally felt like I was in danger when I was near her. I never want to figure out why she was seemingly so obsessed with me. I'd like to begin by describing myself because I believe it's relevant to this story. I'm 25, male, and a bit above average height. I've been doing sports 5 or 6 times a week since I've graduated high school. Gym, running, CrossFit, squash, swimming, and any team sport my friends decided to play at any given time. My favorite hobbies are mountaineering, hiking, and bouldering. I've just recently purchased a new pair of high-altitude mountaineering boots because it's near the end of the summer season and they were on sale. The plan is to wear them in the Alps next summer on a few ascents. I live in a European capital, one that's surrounded by wonderful nature, with many trails and opportunities for hiking. I decided to break in my boots last Saturday, more specifically because it would have been my granddad's birthday. He also loved hiking before he died. These boots are overkill for these woods, but I needed to try them. I selected a nice route around 25 kilometers and set off at about 9 in the morning. It rained just the day before, so I expected a fair amount of mud and not so many people, as they are easily scared off by the weather. Since the summer was excruciatingly hot, it was a nice change of temperature, especially between trees and such, where it's a few degrees cooler than in the city. In the not-so-distant past, my dog would have definitely joined me on this hike, but she's turning 14 this year, and she doesn't enjoy long-distance walks anymore. My girlfriend had to do something for work on short notice, so I knew from the moment I woke up I would be doing the hike alone. The first half of the hike was perfect. The altitude difference along the trail is minimal. I broke a sweat and I misjudged how many people would be out due to the storm the day before. I met at most 6 to 7 people during the first 2 to 3 hours. Most of them were cross-country runners. It's worth mentioning that I wasn't walking quickly. I stopped on many occasions to take some pictures or study some animal tracks. Between 12 and 1, the path ran into an actual road, one where cars can go. The road is asphalt, but deep in the forest, and can only be used to reach certain landmarks that are also in the forest, so cars seldom go there. My trail required me to take this road for a few hundred meters. As I was walking along the road, I heard a car approach me from behind. It went past me, not too quickly or too slowly. It was an older, green SUV with a fresh registration, probably an import. Anyway, I thought nothing of it at the time. Then I heard it come back. It drove past me for the second time, now very slowly. I could clearly see 2 men sitting in the front seats. They were wearing baseball caps and sunglasses. Both had stubble and beard games going on. I assume they were gamekeepers, even though those cars have a crest on the hood and both front doors. As I hike a fair amount, I know these things. I see them around quite a bit. They would also not be driving a car like this. They have Jeeps which are more suitable for the forest. Still, I felt no discomfort, and again, I thought nothing of it. Then my trail left the asphalt road and began snaking into the woods. I walked ahead serenely, gazing at trees and whatnot. I suddenly had the strange sensation that something or someone was behind me. An engine sound was becoming more and more clear as well. At this point, the trail was quite narrow, but if, for whatever reason, you'd want to drive a car on it, you could. Well, just about. Now when I turned around, the aforementioned SUV was basically in my face and was an arm's length away from me, and it stopped just as I had. I looked at the driver, who was staring back. I calmly asked him, "What's wrong? Shall I let you go?" in a polite tone as his window was rolled down. He didn't speak. He slowly started reversing, and he soon disappeared behind a curve. Now I was quite uncomfortable. I also noticed that he was alone in the car, unlike earlier. I listened intently, standing still, since I wasn't sure what was going on. At this point, I was not scared, but there was a faint feeling of uneasiness in the air. Bad thoughts started gathering in the back of my mind. I heard the car stop just behind the curve, then the sound of a door open and shut, but nothing more from that point on. I turned around and began walking towards my destination at a much faster pace than before. Now I was a bit scared. I didn't understand why he didn't answer my question, why he just reversed and left without a word. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I had no desire to go ask him again, or to even see him again for that matter. I had just walked enough for these unpleasant thoughts to slowly be erased from my mind. As I had been drinking a lot of water, as I usually do, I decided to take a piss. I saw a perfect spot, a very narrow path off my trail that led quite clearly to a little hunting tower. I walked over to the tower, put my bag down by the ladder that led up it, and I began pissing. I was also interested in checking Google Maps to see where I was, but since there was no signal, I decided to check my map. I also had a sip of water. I'd been there for a good few minutes before I headed back to the trail from where I deviated. Right before I arrived back to the main trail, I thought to myself how extremely quiet it was. No wind, no noise of any kind, absolutely nothing. This made me realize just a moment later how alone I was. except for the man who was standing maybe 50 meters away from me on the trail in the direction I was headed. I only saw this as soon as I stepped back on the trail. Since the small one to the tower was well hidden by the trees, you couldn't see the main trail as it was running perpendicularly to the small one. I looked at him and I was instantly chilled to the bone. He was dressed in tactical clothing and a baseball bat on his head. The only reason he was standing still, I believe, was a moment of surprise that I had appeared from a place where he didn't expect me to appear from. At this point, I was fully alarmed. He was holding a rifle that had a scope on it. Had this happened without the incident with the SUV, I would have probably walked along the trail, thinking he's a hunter. However, in light of the strange encounter with the SUV, from which the second man was missing, something in me snapped instantly. In hindsight, it's also illegal to hunt in these woods this time of year. I figured, in the matter of 2 seconds, that I was going to sprint through the woods until exhaustion, towards and past the tower, as it seemed natural to do at that time. If there was no malicious intent on this man's behalf, or the others, they'll just think I'm an idiot and forget about me in 2 minutes. If I'm right, it is the best call I will have ever made. And for fuck's sake, he began running towards me. Adrenaline blossoming within me, I began sprinting away. I sprinted past the tower and deep into the bushes, not sparing my legs as I was wearing shorts and a thermal jumper. I crashed through branches, small trees, and slipped on several occasions. I really did sprint until I was exhausted. It must have been several kilometers. I even crossed some smaller trails, but didn't even bother to look either way. My pulse was sky high the whole time. I began checking my phone for signal, but nothing. I was already really angry at myself for not memorizing the license plate. After a while, I began power walking, but still off trail, straight ahead in a direction that I knew would sooner or later lead me out of the woods. When my phone got signal, I told the story to several people frantically, but no one took me seriously. They said I was overreacting and whatnot, and I quote, "You must have misunderstood the situation." Well, I'll let you decide for yourselves if I did or not. Finally, I reached a trail that led directly to a cute little town, and it borders this rather large forest. It felt like eternity, but I walked the last kilometer to the main square, took off my jumper and put it in my bag. At least I looked a little different from far away. I waited for a bus that took me back to a station near my car, rather anxiously. After the bus ride, during which I studied each car on the road, I walked back to my car, got in and drove home. My dog welcomed me like I was coming back from a 2-year deployment. Dogs are just amazing. She must have felt that something shook me up. I spent the afternoon contemplating my life in the bathtub. The boots destroyed my feet, but they aren't meant to be sprinted in for long periods of time. I called the forest's gamekeeper's office. I inquired about whether they have such cars in service, as I came across one. They do not. Their gamekeepers also don't typically work in pairs. Like 99.9% of the time, they're alone. I told them my story, and they took me a lot more seriously than my friends, but they assured me that the police wouldn't. No one could have been legally hunting in the area during summer either. I've been reading local news, but nothing extraordinary has been reported yet. I really hope nothing will be reported either. A couple of years ago, my living situation evaporated faster than I had expected it to. I had to pack all of my possessions into my car and leave where I was living. There was going to be a short stretch of time where I had next to no money, a little over $100 all in, so I bought a cheap tent and some other shit camping equipment and some ramen. I decided I would crash in the woods. That way I could leave my car full of stuff and still have a place to sleep. I lived in a fairly forested area at the time, and since I grew up in the area and partied out in the woods a lot in high school, I knew a decent amount of trails and discreet hiding places not far from said trails. So I brought my gear out to a very small mountain, and since it was going to rain that night, I hunted around for a nice place to set up. Being a mountain, I couldn't just find high ground, but I did find this nice little plateau that projected a few hundred feet from the nearest slope before falling off, and by my best judgment, it seemed as safe a place as any. Well, it turns out my judgment sucks. Not only was the place right in the path of the rain, but all the water from above had sluiced into an impromptu stream whose course ran straight through my tent. I woke up at maybe 2 a.m. to find my sleeping bag half immersed in water and all my possessions soaked through. Both my phone and flashlight were ruined, so I had no source of light. Despite the lack of illumination, I knew I had to get back to my car because I was freezing cold. Since my clothes were literally soaked through, I decided to leave them. I embarked wearing nothing but my boxers. My wallet was ruined too, so I didn't bring it. I quickly realized I was not going to be able to find the trail, so I went back and took my machete so I could hack through the brush. Now most of you can probably see where things are going, but I would remind you that you are sitting someplace warm and reasonably safe. If you want to put yourself into my frame of mind, think of those cold winter days when you go outside and your stream of consciousness transforms from the normal thoughts into an endless stream of fuck. Oh, and add a bunch of your possessions being ruined into the mix. So I faced the general direction of my car and just started walking, angrily chopping at anything that happened to block my path. Eventually, after much effort, I see an end to the tree line ahead of me. I walk out and realize that I am in somebody's backyard. Worse, however, is the fact that said backyard has a screened porch with a small table lamp, and standing on that porch is a woman smoking a cigarette. Now really picture this scene in your head, the image of me soaking wet, walking into your backyard half naked, and enraged swinging a machete around like a madman. The porch lights went off, and I immediately went into, I'm definitely getting arrested mode. I hustled out onto the street and ran towards my car. Then I spent the next hour huddled in the ball on the seat. I was just waiting for the flashing blue lights to come up behind me, but they never did. I have no idea what that woman thought when she saw me, but it couldn't have been good. I'd almost want to go over there and apologize for scaring her, but I'm guessing she does not want to meet me. So for a bit of background, I grew up in a very emotionally and physically abusive home. I've never had anything but negativity spoken to me. As a child, I believed it. My self-esteem was rock bottom, and I believed that I was no good and that everyone hated me, as I was being told. I became a very shy, withdrawn person who really made little effort with friendships. I held everyone at arm's length but was desperate for any small scraps of positive attention. I found this positivity in a wonderful young couple who came into our church to be youth leaders. I was bullied terribly by the kids at my church, and I hated going until this couple came there. They were young, sweet, and kind of went out of their way to be especially nice to me. They arranged a picnic and hike at a close-by state park for one Saturday. I was around 11 at this point, and ordinarily I wouldn't participate in these outings, but since they'd both be there, I was excited to go. We met at the church and all got on the bus. I heard a few whispered comments about, "Why is she here?" and about my clothes. I ignored them and sat by myself at the back of the bus. We got there and I mostly hung out with the couple. We had a big cookout near the lake, and afterwards went for a hike. There were quite a few kids, so Sean and Clara had their hands full on the hike, pretty much just trying to keep everyone on the trail. I, of course, was in the rear of the line. The kids I was behind started making fun of me and telling me I was too lazy to make the hike, and that nobody wanted me there anyway. And then they ran ahead, laughing. I slowed down till they got out of sight, and then I sat on a rock, crying. In a minute or two, I heard someone speak up to me. I looked up, wiping my eyes, and there was a man standing by me. I hadn't heard anyone walk up the trail. I stood and he asked if I was okay. I nodded yes. Then he told me I looked sad and asked me to talk to him. I opened up to him, told him why I was there and the other kids didn't like me or want me there. He asked me my name, where I was from, how old I was. And me, being a dumb 11-year-old kid, decided to tell him. He was probably in his mid-20s with blonde hair and was cute. I was thrilled he was being nice to me. He gave me a hug and said that he and I could hang out and he'd take me back to my group once they came back down off the hike. He took my hand and told me we'd go hiking on a trail he knew. I agreed. All of a sudden, I hear Sean yell my name. He told me to stop and to get away from the man. He came running up and got in between me and the guy. He starts asking him what he thinks he's doing. The guy just shrugged and started walking away through the trees. Sean asked me if I was okay or if the guy hurt me. I could tell Sean was very angry, so I teared up again because I thought I was in trouble. Sean squatted down in front of me and told me I wasn't in trouble, that I'd done nothing wrong. I told him we just talked a bit and he was going to show me another trail to hike. Sean nodded and told me we'd catch up to the others. He pulled Clara to the side once we caught up and they talked quietly. Then she motioned for me to come over to her. She put her arm around me and we sat on a rock, talked a bit and laughed. She had me walk beside her on the way back down and sit with her on the bus. The two of them made the rest of the day nice for me. It took me years to realize what could have happened to me that day and why Sean was so angry. Obviously, once Sean and Clara got to the stopping point on the trail, they realized I was missing and Sean came back down the trail looking for me. If he'd been a few seconds later, I would have been gone with that man, and God only knows what his plans were once he got me out of sight. My poor guardian angel did her job that day. I have no clue if they reported this encounter to the rangers or not, but I sure hope they did. Growing up, my school was about 5 kilometers from my home. I had to walk it because my parents would work until 7 p.m. every day. The walk would go through a huge forest. I can probably count the number of times I've encountered anyone through this forest on one hand. This specific time is always stuck in my head, and looking back, I think I may have seen a kidnapping, or some children trying to escape a kidnapping. I was 12. It was late spring and very hot out. I was on my way home and had probably been walking for 1, maybe 2 kilometers, when I noticed a group of boys walking my way. The boys had no clothes on at all. They were carrying what looked to me like a bat, the animal, not the sport equipment. There were 3 of them. 2 were around the same age as me. 1 looked a bit younger. They looked flushed and sweaty, as if they'd been running or walking for a while. They were almost dragging the younger boy along. He seemed like he needed rest. I just froze and looked at them confused. They were speaking a language I didn't understand. I can speak both Spanish and English, so it was neither of them. The 2 older boys had olive skin with dark hair, while the younger one was more pale and blonde. One of the older boys tried to talk to me, but as I said, I couldn't understand whatever language they were speaking. I said to him in both Spanish and English, "I can't understand you." He seemed confused, but he didn't waste any time. He pointed at the big 1-liter bottle I had in my backpack side pocket and shook his fist by his chest, as if he was begging me. I gave him the bottle and he made sure the younger boy drank first. They finished off the water I had left in there, nodded their heads as if to say thank you, before carrying on the way they were going. I kept on walking home, but I felt creeped out by whatever I had just witnessed. After another kilometer or 2, I saw a man. He was tall and thin and looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He was pale, but pale in a way that he looked ill or sick. Looking back, I think he may have been on something, but that didn't click for me at the time. When I saw him, I tried to keep my head down and kept walking, but he stopped me. In broken Spanish, he said to me that he was looking for his little brothers, that they were lost and asked if I had seen them. I shook my head. He said thanks and carried on walking. I tried my hardest to walk normally, but as soon as he was out of sight, I ran, and I didn't stop running until I reached home. Once my parents got home, I told them what had happened. They shrugged it off and told me I shouldn't worry. When I insisted I was serious, my dad promised he would call the police in the morning and tell them what I had seen. If my dad did call them, I was never called in for further questioning. No police asked me for descriptions or anything. My dad swears he reported it, but I have my doubts. I just wish they would have taken me seriously. This happened in January a few years ago, on my way into work one cold, wintry Friday morning. I had a rough start to the day. I remember waking up in a panic as I realized I was holding my phone in my hand. I had been hitting snooze on my alarm for the past hour. I wasn't even giving them a chance to sound. Apparently, as soon as my phone started to vibrate, I would hit the side button to silence it. I was exhausted. I had already worked Monday through Thursday, 10-hour days that typically turn into 12s at that time of year. I had just found out that I was pregnant the week prior, so I was even more tired than normal. This type of behavior was very unlike me. I'm always on time to work. I don't usually work on Fridays, but once a year we have our annual mandatory training for all staff members. It's definitely not a day that can be missed or one to be extremely late to, so I quickly throw on some clothes, tie my hair up into a ponytail and brush my teeth. Then out the door I went. I had 25 minutes until I had to be there, so I didn't even let my car warm up. As I pulled out of my driveway, I remember thinking to myself my dad would kill me if he knew. He's a mechanic, and that was something he was always preaching the importance of. I finally get out of the neighborhood, hit the highway, and notice my gas light is on. Another annoyance that would cut into my time, but I decided I would stop once I got off on the exit as I had a few minutes to spare. So I did. I pull my car up to the pump and turn it off, hop out into the freezing cold to get the gas started and quickly jump back in. There's a guy pumping gas into his white work truck right in front of me. I didn't really pay him much mind. Those trucks were everywhere near my workplace at the time, as it's near the river where all the bridge construction had been going on. I'm texting my friend from work and letting her know where I am when I get that feeling someone is looking at me. I look up and make eye contact with the work truck guy. He quickly looks away just as I hear the gas click off. I get back out to finish and don't think anything else about it. I hop back in my car and get ready to go to work. At this point, I probably had about 5 minutes left, which would have been plenty considering the proximity. I press the start button. Click, click, click. Shit, I thought, as I did it again, only to hear that same sound. What do you know? My car won't start. The battery's dead. And for the second time that morning, I thought of my dad and his advice. If I would have just let it warm up, I wouldn't be having this problem right now. I try for a third time, hoping it's the charm, but it's no use. The guy in the work truck notices at this point. He starts to make his way toward me, so I step out of my car. He asks me if I'm having car trouble, and I tell him I think my battery's dead. He tells me that he can help me, but he doesn't have jumper cables in this particular truck. He does, however, only work right down the road. He's on one of the bridge crews, and he has a set there. He says he'll run to get them and come right back. I tell him that he doesn't have to do that, but he says he doesn't mind at all. I think about it for a second. My husband's at home, already asleep at this point. He works third shift, and I don't want to wake him up if there's no need. And my dad's already at his job. I remember thinking that he probably has a kid my age somewhere, one who he would hope someone would help in this type of situation one day. He's probably just a father type trying to help. So I say okay, and thanked him for his help. He said no problem, that he'd be back in a couple of minutes, and left to get the jumper cables. As I'm waiting, I called my boss to let her know what was going on, that I would be in as soon as possible. She offers to send someone out there to help, but I tell her about the work truck guy and that I'll call her back if this doesn't work. By the time I hang up, he's back with the cables. We get my car started back up again. We let it run for a few minutes and make small talk. That's of little importance, like typical strangers do when they're trying to fill the silence. It's during this time he asks me if I'm a nurse. Immediately I'm alarmed because I'm not wearing any scrubs. I think he could see the shock on my face because he quickly said that he noticed my license plate when he was pulling back in. I laugh in relief and slight embarrassment as I remembered my license plate is in fact one of the state-issued nursing ones. I reply that yes, I am a nurse, and that I'm actually running late for work. He asks if I work at a hospital up the road, to which I reply no, I don't. Now he's the one that looks confused, because where else would a nurse work, right? I don't want to give too much away, and I feel a bit uncomfortable with the questions, but I don't want to be rude. So I say, I work at a facility not too far from here, and I leave it at that. I mention again how I'm running late, and he unhooks the jumper cables. I thank him again, and we both get in our vehicles and drive away. I let him pull out first, and then I proceed to take a roundabout way to work, just in case he's watching. I felt kind of silly, but you never know, right? I finally get to work, and I jump straight into the training. I honestly didn't think about what happened that morning again, except here and there when my coworkers asked a few questions in the break room during lunch. The long day finally comes to an end, and we all head out. As I'm walking towards my car, I see a piece of paper shoved down into the driver's side window. I stand there and look at it for a second, thinking of the guy from that morning, and then glance around the parking lot. I don't see anything unusual, and remind myself that he didn't know where I worked. I laugh at myself for being paranoid because it's probably a note from my best friend. She works at the hospital a few blocks over. As I'm sure you can guess, the note wasn't from her. It was from the work truck guy that morning. I don't remember it all word for word, but most of it I know I'll never forget. It made my skin crawl and thoroughly freaked me the fuck out. It listed his phone number at the top with an arrow pointing to it that said, "Call soon, love." He said that he felt we had this connection, one of two souls, and that he wanted to continue getting to know me, that he knew the reason why he was at the gas pump in front of me that morning was that so he could find me because the Lord knows he has been searching for me for so many years now that he couldn't let me slip away. We just couldn't ignore fate like that. No. Not when it had been made as clear as it was that morning. I dropped the piece of paper like it was on fire. I felt my heart drop with all the panic and paranoia that came after reading it. I was so freaked out that I immediately called my mom, my dad, and my husband. I didn't want to drive home. What if he followed me? Did he not see my wedding ring? How did he even find out where I worked? He literally had to have driven through about 20 other medical facility parking lots just to find my car, because I watched him drive off in the other direction. I never saw him turn around in my rear view. Trust me, I was watching. My work building is kind of hard to find too, with it being off the road on a side street, especially for a man that lived a couple hours north of here, as he told me earlier during our small talk. He wouldn't have been familiar with the surrounding area enough just to come upon my car like that. I didn't walk in or out of work by myself for months after that, not until well after that bridge was finished. It's always nighttime when I arrive to work, and for part of the year when I leave, so there was no way in hell that I was going to walk across that dark parking lot by myself. I've never seen him again, but that hasn't stopped me from feeling like someone is watching me at random times. That type of paranoia just kind of sticks with you. If only I had just listened to my dad's advice and let my damn car warm up. But that's a mistake I have not, and will not, ever make again. I can guarantee it. When I was 5, my family attended a church with 2 stories. Downstairs were the nursery and Sunday school rooms. Upstairs was the main church room where the service was held, as well as some offices, a kitchen, and a library. The main doors opened onto a stairway, connecting the 2 levels. After Sunday school, kids would either continue playing downstairs until their parents came to get them, or, if they were old enough and impatient to go home like me, could go find their parents upstairs and try to convince them to stop talking and leave. My mom would spend what felt like hours talking to people after service, so sometimes I'd go up and down the stairs a couple of times. Up to ask if we could leave, back down to play when she said not yet, repeat again maybe 10 minutes later. One Sunday during one of my trips up the stairs, there was an elderly couple standing outside the glass door, smiling and waving at me. I remember thinking maybe they'd been locked out somehow and wanted to come in, which was a silly thing to think since the doors were never locked during the hours the church was open. Wanting to be helpful, I went and opened the door and told them that they could come in. It turns out they did not want to come in, and instead told me they were my grandparents, that they were there to pick me up. That confused me as I was familiar with both sets of my grandparents, and these people were not either. I told them that no, they were not my grandparents. At that point I was thinking they had me just confused for another kid, and I said so. They then quickly stated that they meant they were my grandparents, that we hadn't met since I was a baby, so I wouldn't remember them. They said my parents asked them to drive me home since they were busy. Even if I hadn't been smart enough to realize that they could just come in if they wanted, that at least seemed odd to me, and even as they protested it wasn't necessary, I said I was going to go ask my parents and headed upstairs. My mom was still talking to a group of other churchgoers, but after literally tugging on her sleeve for probably a minute, I was able to get her attention and announce loudly that my grandparents were there to pick me up, and if I was supposed to go with them. She looked confused, then concerned, and then told me that my grandparents were not there to pick me up since they all were dead. That pretty quickly put a stop to the discussion about raising money for stained glass windows or whatever. My mom and some other adults went back with me to the door, but the couple was no longer there. Since I really couldn't describe them any better than old, white hair, looked friendly but not my grandparents, it was just sort of uneasily put down to them mistaking me for someone else. From then on, despite my impatience to leave, I stayed downstairs until my parents came and got me. I remember being concerned about it for a while, but my mom would discourage discussing it, saying that they just made a mistake. It is possible that that's all it was, but I've always remembered that it felt wrong how insistent they were that they were there to pick me up. To be completely honest, men never usually hit on me or approach me at all. This is because I'm a very large woman. It is weird when they do. It has only happened twice in the last 6 or 7 years. The first of those times was okay, but it still was a bit uncomfortable since I was in the elevator in my apartment building with a complete stranger. He kept asking me out for coffee. I know I'm not attractive, so I never believe people when they act like I am. I'm also not looking to date. The second time, however, just happened recently. After work, I took the bus to the grocery store. It's a few minutes in the opposite direction from my apartment, but they have some pretty good deals, so I like to go there at least once per month. As I was just starting to walk away from the bulk foods area, I heard someone say, "Hey." There were other people in the area, so I figured this person was trying to get the attention of a deli or bakery employee nearby. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, but paid him no attention. I walked off to continue my shopping. I had used a phone in the store that automatically rings up a taxi company to call my ride. I left and walked off to the side where the benches are to wait for my taxi. A few people walked behind the bench as they also left. Then one stopped and said, "Hello." I still paid no attention. The only person I talked to was my sister, and she was back at our apartment. He came a bit closer, cleared his throat, and said, "Excuse me." I turned, and it was the guy. It was then that I realized he'd been trying to get my attention inside the store earlier. "Oh, hello," I smile. I really am anxious out in public, but I am decent at faking friendliness. "Do you live around here?" "No, I'm just waiting for my ride home." "Ah, I live just over there." He pointed at the townhouse complex across the street. "I can give you a ride if you like." Well, that was fast and forward. Thanks, but that's alright. I already called my ride and it's on its way." "Are you certain they're coming? Because it is no problem to drive you." I assured him that my ride was for sure on the way. He kept trying over and over to get me to come with him, despite my polite refusals. He offered to put his phone number in my phone so I could call him any time, day or night, and he would come pick me up. Well, that's creepy. I told him the truth and said that I didn't have a cell phone. He immediately challenged that by asking how I called for a ride then. I said that there's a phone inside the store that I used. He chuckled and asked, "Are you worried that if I gave you a ride, your husband would kill me?" "Husband? Yeah, right. I'm 35 and have never even had a boyfriend." "Oh, he might. He can get like that sometimes. Better if I just take my cab when it arrives," I lied. "Well, you don't have to tell him that I gave you a ride." "That wouldn't be very honest of me. Besides, the folks at the taxi company already know who I am, so I can't just no-show them," I said to him. Which is true. I've been a regular for the past 6 years. They know me by voice now. He then asked where I'm from. I said that I'm from this general area. He then said that he was from Africa. I asked which country. He told me, then started talking about being from a tribe and how tribes would fight each other for things and whatnot. I was just praying that my cab would be there soon. I kept turning to check. Finally, it arrived. I stood up and said, "Looks like my ride is here." He said that it was nice to talk to me as I was putting my bags in the car. I hopped in the cab, thanked the cabbie for finally saving me, and then we were off. That guy must have offered me a ride at least a dozen times, but that wasn't the end of it. As I was getting my stuff out of the cab upon arriving at the complex, that man drove past me. He doesn't live here too. He followed me. I don't know what he hoped to accomplish since the buildings are secured, and he doesn't know my first name, let alone my last, which is the only name listed beside the buzzer. I hustled into the building. My girlfriend and I took some time out to do some backpacking and travel the world. We went to some incredible places and met some interesting people, but our most interesting story is probably this one. As I said, we went all over: Myanmar, Bolivia, Mexico, many places that have some unsafe reputations. However, we are both pretty good at reading people and staying out of trouble, so we've never had any major incidents. We were on a fairly tight budget at this point in our journey, as we had recently been to Japan and wanted to chill for a bit before finding some work in Vietnam. We decided to volunteer on a Cambodian island, Koh Rong Samlem. It's a bit of a luxury island full of resorts that we couldn't normally afford to stay at, so it seemed like a good gig. I worked behind the bar at this resort, and my girlfriend worked in the restaurant. In return, we got to sleep in the dorm and our own meals for free. The manager told me that since I was working behind the bar and Scottish, an English guy who lived on the island would likely come and see me, and that his name was Dog. It didn't take long for this to take place. A fairly old guy in his late 50s or early 60s came into the bar. He was quite tall and still powerfully built, and he was accompanied by a massive Rottweiler, which he quickly told me was also called Dog. We had a bit of a laugh, taking the piss out of each other. He was making fun of me being Scottish, and I was making fun of him going by the name Dog and being English. I noticed he was always wearing wife beaters, which said, Dogs Offshore Bar, and had a picture of his dog, the Rottweiler, on it. I got to know more about Dog the man. He used to work in construction and offshore, so being as I did as well, we had quite a bit to talk about, and heaps of opportunity to talk as he usually arrived for his first beer at 7 a.m. He was clearly an alcoholic, but he never struck me as a bad person early on, just a sadly complicated one. Like when you talk to someone who's homeless. Anyone who's ever been to Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, or any Southeast Asian country will understand how rare it is to see a dog that's not some kind of street mutt or tiny pet. Dog's huge dog would stand out even in Europe, however. Even for a Rottweiler, it was huge, massively muscular with a metal chin to give some semblance of control if it was to kick off. I really like dogs, so I was quite interested in what this huge dog was doing on an island. I always made sure to have some water out for it. It was friendly enough, but never left his owner's side, and seemed to be a working dog in terms of its intensity. It was clearly a guard dog. It turned out the dog was actually a Finnish drug dealer's dog, and Dog the man had bought him. He told me the dog had an attack command, and he kept him primed by using it often on other island dogs. He told me it had killed multiple dogs this way. I didn't believe this at first, but there was an island dog the manager would often leave food out for, and this dog would come near the bar usually when Dog's monster dog wasn't about that night. He must have been hungry enough to brave it, and Dog hissed the command. The Rottweiler was bounded for the island dog, knocking over chairs and all sorts, until he was called off. It was pretty scary. One night I was sat at the bar talking with Dog about his job. I would be taken on soon at a digital marketing company. I was in talks with the CEO at this company. At the time it was for a digital marketing job in which I would work from home or coffee shops, updating and improving websites. He said it sounded made up and that the company was likely some kind of con to get my bank details. I told him that it was a real company and that I had Googled it. He was really drunk at this point, and the restaurant was now closed. My girlfriend joined us and we were all having a beer at the bar. He told my girlfriend how I believed everything I read online and how I shouldn't do that. He said people publish all kinds of made-up shit on there. I asked what he was referring to, and he said, "Never Google me." So I said, "How could I Google you? Your name is Dog. If I Googled you, I would just see a picture of an Alsatian." But then I remembered those tops he wore, Dog's Offshore Bar. So I told him, "I'm going to Google you," and I was laughing. He was getting quite annoyed, but at this point, other than owning a weaponized canine, I thought he was pretty harmless. I was wrong. I began reading out loud the interesting things I found out about his bar and other related stories. One of particular interest was about a conviction. The joking and laughing stopped, and I quickly stopped reading out loud. I looked quickly to my girlfriend, and I could see the smile leave her face. She realized we were drinking with a killer. It turned out this guy had murdered his Thai wife, and then had been briefly imprisoned before paying bail. He then fled the country before the trial. He had stabbed her. His alibi to the police was that he couldn't have killed her because he was having sex with a prostitute on the beach at the time. He told us that he had been framed, that his wife's ex was in the police, and that he had killed her for moving on. I was nodding along to everything he said, trying my best to show I agreed with him, whilst making sure the machete I used to open the coconuts for cocktails was in easy reach. He told us how hard it was being one of the few white guys in a Thai prison, how he had to attack guards to get into solitary confinement, and then they beat him mercilessly. He told us that they used to leave Shanks in his room and put him in the yard with the sex offenders for him to kill. He told us that he had killed before he went to prison, and that he killed when he was inside, but he did not kill his wife. His wife was a prostitute he met while trafficking women from Thailand to Singapore on his boat, the same one he used to flee Thailand after his arrest and set up his bar. Dog's Offshore Bar with the tagline, "Dogs welcome, wives must be kept on leashes or under control." We both acted like we believed him, and eventually he left. The whole night, however, I was waiting next door for him and his dog to come for us. I even propped a bin up against the door, so anyone coming in would knock it over, and we would maybe have a chance to react. I nearly attacked my friend when he came in. It was so fucked. We quickly decided to leave after this, and only saw a dog once more. My girlfriend was opening a can of coconut milk for a curry, and he came by and jokingly asked if she needed a knife, and he patted his back pocket. The guy is known as Mick the Palm, or Mick the Dog if you want to Google this. If you Google Dogs Offshore Bar, you'll see what I did. He was living in a tent on the island with his dog keeping watch while he slept. I'm not sure if he's still there now. Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for checking out the video. Do me a favor and leave a like and comment. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. If you do fancy checking out my Patreon, channel memberships, or any of the social media, all my links are in the description. I'd like to give a shout out to my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel. So a huge thanks to Pretty Girl 215, Borderline Betty, Sarah C., Blazed Goddess, Christopher, Spider's Web, Ooh La La Andrea, Lady Drackard, Sue, Absinthe Alice, Rochelle, Astara Rain, Monique, Crafty Kel, Monica Levelace, Emma, Sean Gorman, Gabrielle, Seraphina Nightingale, Misanthropia, Fluby, Ryan, Brenda, Rudy, Christina De La Rosa, Noosh, Lulu Rogers, Fire05, Linda, Shan, Jody, Sarah P., Kathleen Fenton, James Gargano, Gemma Allen, Monica Levelace, Alex, and Courtney Maxwell. Thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you're all having a great week. I'll see you on the next one.